Good evening, sir. If you just please give us your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mayor. My name is Alfred Pereira. I'm the current owner of Howell's Auto Body.
Welcome, Mr. Pereira.
Good evening, council and newly elected and professionals. I'm here this evening with some concerns in reference to this towing. I have done towing in this township for over 30 years. I'm one of the original towers when the police department first went into effect. So that's 30-plus years. In these 30-plus years, I participated in ordinances that were affected, that were put into effect. I have memoranda and letters here stating, going back as far and further, 1982, that were asked for my input from Howell Township, from Bruce Davis, and comments for my comments. The concerns that I have is that this town in the past 30 years has grown. It has grown leaps and bounds. And with the leaps and bounds that we get, we have situations that occur. And in these situations, we have problems that the towers incur. Some of the problems that they incur are because we have in the area, coming into this area, and the police department could testify to that matter, that we have a lot of immigration coming in here as far as illegals. These illegals are driving vehicles that are unregistered, uninsured, all types of different problems. And these cars, from time to time, are pulled over. The police department is doing their best they can in keeping the roadways safe. So they have to enforce the codes of safety. Now, in this safety that they do, we are the ones that pull these cars for the township. Being that we pull these cars for the township, at times we are the agents for the township, and we are entrusted with entrusted property. This property that we wind up getting at times becomes unclaimed. Over the years, I have discussed with various officials from the police department that at the time, and I'm going back over 20 years, it was discussed with them that something had to be done with these vehicles. And at the time, we always heard something will be done. In the meanwhile, we are still pulling these cars in. I happen to be fortunate that I have a large property, and therefore I didn't do much complaining. But at this time, something needs to be done. And I believe that this ordinance that is on the table tonight is not the correct way to take care of this problem. And it is a problem that the town may not be aware of, other than the police department and the towers. Now, I have on my property, from time to time, many vehicles. In fact, I live at the property, and at times, I don't like it. But there's nothing that I've been able to do. I'm here this evening to tell you that this ordinance that has been put into, or they're trying to adopt this evening, whoever the authors may be of this ordinance, I have a few questions that I would like to ask the authors of this ordinance. First of all, I'd like to know who the authors were.
Certainly. Mr. Chernetsky, would you give comment on all the different participants that evaluated, if you're at liberty to...
Well, the members of the Traffic Safety Unit were involved in drafting this, and apparently the Ordinance Review Committee, going back some time, helped establish, I guess, the foundation for it, and then it was fine-tuned and greater detailed and researched by Mr. Herring, our Deputy Township Solicitor, and then reviewed again by our solicitor.
Okay.
Okay. So I take it the police department did have input in it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Being that we have some of the officials here this evening, I believe we have two that are here present, Mr. Markulik and Mr. Fiore, both from Traffic Safety. In the past, they may not be aware of it because they may have not been, I know some of them have a considerable amount of years, and one of them is about to retire.
Is that you, Mr. Markulik?
No, sir.
No.
Not yet.
Right, Joe? If I could, I would tonight.
Okay, well, like I stated in the beginning of my statement, I did participate in many, asked for comment on many of these ordinances. At this time, it kind of gets me a little bit because we were not afforded, when I say we, in the past, it was always, historically, it's been that the towers have a meeting with the police department to go over these matters, whether it be setting rates or any of that, you know, discussions.
Let me ask you, if you were to look at the specific provisions in the ordinance, are there particular areas that are of concern that you'd like us to consider?
Yes.
Okay, what are they?
Basically, the ordinance, if you look at the ordinance, it reads that all the responsibilities are going to be the tower's responsibility.
Okay.
Okay?
Whose responsibility do you think that it
Well, as far as they changed the terms to read as consent and non-consent
Where's that, sir?
It's at the beginning.
at the beginning of the,
It's right on.
if you look through the ordinance, you'll see different areas where it's consent and non-consent.
Section 14.
Consent or non-consent, sir?
what section
Right.
is that?
Section 1.
Section 1, okay.
Okay, now it goes into certain areas there where you see that the police department will also tell you that it's a consent or non-consent. Okay. I have a problem with the consent and non-consent, and that problem is consent or non-consent can be changed to whatever they would like to do. And in my opinion, it should be either authorized by the department, which they do tell you they authorize the tows, okay? There's a little bit of a problem with that, but we'll leave that go at the present time. Now, going back to my situation, I have, at my, Mr. Hammer had just said it about junk cars and all that. I have many cars on my property, which I've been cited for in the past, okay, which is recent, not too long ago. I've been cited for having unjunked vehicles. Now, the township and the safety has worked along with me. From time to time, we try to touch base to get some resolution in some of these cars so we can get rid of them. That is a big problem, getting rid of these cars, because it's a process. And the process that I have asked and suggested in the past, there are many municipalities other than Howell Township that do have in place for auctions to sell these vehicles, and at times give opportunity to other people that may be able to use a lesser car, lesser cost of a car, where they could pick up at an auction.
So is your concern that you've been cited for vehicles on your property that you have no control over getting rid of because they've been towed there by the police department, and for whatever reason...
We've towed them there, yes.
You've towed them there,
of the police department.
and the owner, for some reason, disappears, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
You want to get them off your property, and you're looking for relief to accelerate that. Is that your testimony?
That's part of it, yes.
All right, well, on that point, Sergeant Markulik, what's your comment?
Over the years, we've helped Al with his junk titles, getting his junk titles, and giving him the process to remove the vehicles to be junked. We just began helping him again because he ran into a problem with getting a fine from the township. We went over to his property, several officers, and went through every car on his property. There was, I think, over 40 vehicles on the property. And at this time, last year, over a year, we gave him 10 junk titles, and they should have been junked. The vehicles were still there.
Can I just interrupt? Is there a pending summonses right now?
I believe.
Is there?
Is there?
I don't know, is that...
The summons,
I'm asking Al, are you presently have summonses pending against you?
those summonses were settled in court. I pleaded guilty because of the fact that we're paying on them at present.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure there was no pending criminal or, municipal court action that we really shouldn't be discussing at this point. Are there summonses that are still outstanding?
No.
Okay.
All right, so I think this is maybe another sidebar issue that probably we could look at just from a policy perspective, that from time to time, there has to be a meeting scheduled between traffic safety to review the inventory of any of the wreckers, so that there can be a constant review. So if there are vehicles that are outside of your control, that you're not held responsible for them. And I might recommend, Mr. Chernietsky, because I don't know that we have to enact it in the law, can you, through the Traffic Safety Bureau, perhaps arrange a meeting along what we're talking about here to try and put some policies around this so that a wrecker doesn't have an issue like we're talking about where they're stuck with these vehicles? Is that fair enough?
This was a land use situation where I did mention to land use that these vehicles belong to the township, and they didn't care.
All right, well, I think you raise a very valid point. I'm certain with Sergeant Markulik and Mr. Chernietsky offline, there should be a meeting with the towers, and that issue should come up, and there should be a policy that talks about the ongoing review of the inventory so that you're not penalized if there's nothing you can do, it's our vehicle, and that we can put something in place to effectuate that. Would that be satisfactory?
Yes.
Okay.
The answer to Mr. Markulik's thing, he said that that they had given us these titles for these vehicles to be disposed of. Apparently, I had this file in my files there, and when we went to get rid of these vehicles, they are in Howell Township's name and have never been endorsed.
All right, I can...
So therefore, I could not complete the disposal.
Yeah, the only concern I have on that particular point is it probably falls outside of a hearing on the particular ordinance.
Right.
I think you have our commitment that the manager will arrange a meeting with you and the other wreckers and traffic safety to come up with a process to address the issue so that it doesn't come up again.
Yes.
What other comments do you have
Mayor, I'm
specific
sorry,
to?
just to be clear about
sir.
expectations, if there's
Yeah.
anything that requires a change to the code,
You'll
it has to come back to the
us.
council, yes.
No question. If there's anything that requires a policy change, we would certainly, the council would expect you to bring it back to us, and we'll operationalize it. Everyone agree with that? What else do you have on the
Okay,
ordinance?
as far as the vehicles that I have on my property right now, from Howell Township, there are 40-plus cars. 40-plus cars, and I'm just going to give you some figures as to
Can I-
where it puts
Can I
me.
ask you,
We need
I-
to stick to the ordinance.
Al, I completely appreciate your concern. The problem that we have from a statutory perspective is that this is a hearing specific to the ordinance. You raise some very good issues that I think are sidebar issues. We have to limit the hearing to comments specific to any of the items in this particular document. And I assure you, we'll give you an appropriate forum to address all these other operational items. But what we really need to hear are your concerns on any of the sections 1 through 15.
Okay. Number 306-19.
306. Okay, hold on one second. 30619. It's toward the back, folks.
Yes, it is.
It is at the top of Section 12, I'm sorry, Section 13. Disposal of abandoned vehicles. Is that your comment?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Okay, in the ordinance at present, each applicant for a permit or renewal of a permit shall accomplish by a fee of $50. No, wait a minute, I'm at 18, I'm sorry.
You're in Section 18?
No, well, yeah, I can discuss that one also. There's a fee of $50 at present,
Okay.
okay? The new one is,
Is 250.
is $250.
Okay,
That's five-fold.
sure. I think the concern that the Ordinance Review Committee, if I recall the comments, was that that ordinance was originally crafted 25, 30 years ago, and that may have been an appropriate amount at that time, but over a period of 25 or 30 years, that fee needed to be updated to reflect current cost of doing business, et cetera, et cetera. So it really was commented. Did I get that right, Mr. Lubrio?
Yes, Mayor, we researched the surrounding towns to bring it up to the standards we do.
For the benefit of the record, Mr. Lubrio was the chairperson of the Ordinance Review Committee. They did an exceptional job in reviewing this, and his comment was that they reviewed area municipalities, and this was apparently a best practice.
What do we get for that $250?
That's a good question. Sergeant Markula, can you answer that?
You get a permit.
A permit and, the opportunity to work within Howell Township.
So your concern is that you don't want to have that $250 annual fee?
Well, that's true.
I think the only...
Very much so.
I think...
Let's beat on.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, look, we appreciate your comment. We need to update it to make certain that the municipality operates in a way that's favorable to the taxpayers.
I would think that it would be done in steps rather than a big step, 5 times of what it presently is.
We understand your concern.
Graduating steps. Okay, getting back down to 30619, disposal of abandoned vehicles.
Okay?
In the present ordinance, if at the end of 30 days, the registered owner of a motor vehicle has not claimed his vehicle, then the operator shall be permitted to request that the chief of police submit the appropriate application for a salvage permit for the said vehicle. This provision applies only to motor vehicles directed to be towed by the police department. What I'm getting at is, this was discussed with the police department, and this is how they afforded to help me. Okay, now, they were helping me get these titles,
Okay,
where I believe I may be the only one they were doing it for,
okay,
because I had the interest in it.
okay.
And now the new ordinance wants you to do it.
And now, right, now the new ordinance...
Now, the new ordinance wants us to do all of this,
Yes.
okay? Where does the township have its obligation?
I'll give you my perspective on it. It's my own personal opinion. We want our police department to focus on, in particular, the Traffic Safety Bureau, on traffic safety measures, dealing with speeding issues, safety concerns. You know, quite frankly, we want to offset as many of these responsibilities to private enterprise as possible, because you have a franchise, if you will, to cover being a record for the municipality, and you're entitled to earn certain revenues and profits as a result of that. But we want to attempt to diminish as best as possible the roles that we have to fulfill, which generate administrative costs that have to get passed on to the taxpayers. And so, quite candidly, this is being amended, if you will, so that the responsibility becomes that of the person who's interested in having this franchise, so to speak. And we really want to divest ourselves of having to do more administrative work that takes someone like Sergeant Markulik off the beat. And that's really our primary responsibility as it relates to the police department.
Well, I can tell you that the other towns are doing it, and they're having auctions, and they're generating revenue, okay? And that revenue offsets the time that is put into doing this.
What I might, I mean, Sergeant Markulik, on the auction issue, do you want to make a comment?
I spoke to several officers, excuse me, from other towns, and the revenue is slim to none, because they have to pay the tow companies for storage, and then the money's is really minimal.
Yeah, I think what we can tell you honestly is that between the Ordinance Review Committee and our police department, we did do quite a bit of due diligence on what other municipalities are doing. And if they're still in the business of doing some of that paperwork, we're not going to be critical of them. But one of the things that we want to do is run this municipality like a successful business.
Right.
And that means we want to relinquish some of these administrative burdens back to private enterprise so we can get our police focusing on police duties. So I think that's all we can tell you on that point. Your point is well taken.
And if adopted, any vehicle that's been there now will go with the old ordinance, and, you know, we'll help him the best
Okay,
as possible.
so we'll help clean up whatever inventory he has. This is as
Yeah,
of
we're
go
working on it.
forward.
Just as an example, just take the 40 cars that I got there. The ordinance in the town for storage is $20 per day. Just in those 40 cars that I have there for township, that is $800 a day that I am not getting.
Okay?
It is $24,000 a month. It is $288,000 per year.
Why is he not getting that?
I have vehicles there that have been there for 2 to 3 years, and they have been given to the police department for titles.
Well, hold that point. Sergeant Markulik, why is this?
Over the past few years, we've been trying to get junk titles, and DMV has changed the process where you just can't go with the check and say, here's a check for $12 for the 6 titles that we have. They basically want an open check and them to fill in the blanks. And at this time, our chief says, no way, we're not doing that. So we're trying to work another way around it, and we haven't managed an appropriate way yet.
The township is worrying about $12.
Well, here's my perspective, and certainly any member of the council can comment. I feel very strongly we want to relinquish some of our administrative burdens back to a franchisee, if you will. But at the same time, you're entitled to earn whatever revenues you're entitled to get. So I feel for you as a business owner that if you're not getting that revenue, then we need Mr. Chernetsky to find a way to come up with a solution Because if he's complying with all of this and he's entitled to get this revenue and he's not getting it, I mean, Mr. Filiatro is shaking his head that, this is an issue, but, I feel for him as a business owner, if he's following the law and he's entitled to, I mean, if it was my business and somebody owed me $200,000, I could tell you, we'd have a real problem. So how do we fix this?
Well, the supposition's about 200,000, I don't think we should get bogged down on. But
I mean, whatever it is.
the bottom line is, these are abandoned vehicles. Oftentimes, they don't have insurance. Oftentimes, the owners have no assets. That's why they're abandoned. So, big policy picture is, who's going to share the cost? The person that gets the permit, that when he does have an insurance, he bills the $20, and part of the cost of business is dealing with junk vehicles. And that's basically the balance that I'll leave for better minds than me to figure out.
So your perspective on this, which makes sense, is that this is the risk of doing business. That there's going to be people who are in this predicament, and if you want to be a wrecker, this might be the downside of being in that business. Is that a fair statement, Sergeant?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think many wreckers in Howell Township are going to want to have this. And I have the bills here, so if anybody would like to accept them, they're here.
I think what we can do, again, as a sidebar, is that maybe in this meeting that you'll have with the manager and the police, this issue can be talked about, and if there's a way to help you, we'll be delighted to do it. It's a fair point. What else do you have for us?
Okay, when these people, as Mr. Gannon here just remarked, when these titles were, you had to make notifications and so forth in order to obtain junk titles from the state of New Jersey. There are codes that pertain to municipalities which do expedite matters a lot faster than a private franchise. The letter that is sent out, and I have numerous copies here, in reference to these vehicles, it states to the individual of the vehicle, if you do not contact the listed below tower within 5 days of receipt of this letter, that a title will be obtained from the Division of Motor Vehicles, and your vehicle will be auctioned and or junked. Okay? And Howell Township has chosen to junk.
Okay.
The titles and the codes that they use, the NJ codes that they have, that they send out, and they further comment on it to the owner or the last known owner of the vehicle, that you should be advised that this is a violation of New Jersey 39-456.5, that any person who violates this section shall be subject to a fine of a first offense not more than $100 nor more than $500. And his or her driver's license privileges be suspended or revoked by the director for not more than 2 years. For any subsequential violation, he or she shall be subject to a fine of not more than $500, nor than $1,000 also. I have these letters that have been sent out by Howell Township to all these people of these vehicles that were on my property. Some of them have been disposed of already. But they send these out, and if they can do this for us, why can't they do the balance of it? And why can't they enforce the violations that are being stated?
Sergeant, can you comment?
Like you said, over the past 30 years, I guess we've been doing letters like this, and it's just very time-consuming. I right now have an officer who, that's all he does is the junk titles. I actually have 2 officers that are tied up all the time, just trying to straighten out Al's, paperwork that he currently has with the 40 vehicles. It's always growing, we're a big town, and we're just looking to, have them, the business owner, take care of these matters on their own to alleviate us from getting tied down on the paperwork.
Mr. Markulik here can attest that this is an ongoing thing, I believe. He can give you his own words, that this never stops. It's a continuous rotation of cars coming in all the time.
So what's the solution, Sergeant? Is there a solution? Is there a way to address this concern?
Well, in his case, unfortunately, he has vehicles from, mid-'80s in there that we had no knowledge of till recently, until he had the complaint. So now we finally know of some of the vehicles, and we are doing some research on them. So, some of the 40 may be, almost 20 years old.
I beg to differ that. There are cars here that I have all the lists of, and you can see the timeline. There is a timeline between the time that I let the police department make them aware that the vehicle is there, and the time that the actual title is received from the police department, which is in excess of a year.
Mayor, I don't want to diminish the concerns that the resident is stating, because, there are many, and I think the police department is trying to work with him. But I think kind of the broader point is that this ordinance represents a policy to upgrade and update how we do these things, and it's part of that effort. Clearly, the frustration, he states, it has to do with maybe a policy that wasn't working and was in need of updating to reflect what our organization now does.
Okay.
So we will take his administrative concerns offline, but again, just to get back onto the ordinance.
I think that, this begs the question that we're going to have that sidebar meeting, and we'll address some of these ongoing issues.
There are numerous issues throughout the ordinance, and my last statement here that I'm going to make is, the ordinance should not be adopted in its present form, and that should be for further discussion with the the parties that are involved, which have never been given an opportunity to discuss these things. These things were put together, and no one discussed them with the parties that are involved in it.
We appreciate your comments. Thank you for your testimony. What I will tell you is that by going through the process that we're doing now, and we did get correspondence, at least I received a copy of it, I think we all did, from your attorney. We've all had an opportunity to review it. But the process that we went through, where we had an introduction and we had an opportunity for this to be advertised and for people to provide us their comments, is exactly what you're doing now.
Yes.
And in this way, everyone is afforded an opportunity to comment, and not necessarily one particular interest group. But we do appreciate and respect your comments, and we appreciate the fact that you do business in the town. And we're very mindful of things you mentioned. What I can assure you is that the manager will meet with you, with representatives from the police department, on these administrative issues. You have our assurances we will attempt to come to an adequate resolution. Issues that may need additional policy directive, Mr. Trunansky will bring that back to the council, and the council will deliberate on whatever else may need to be done to potentially execute some of the things that you've raised. We will
I
take that into
reiterate
consideration.
that I believe that this should not be
Okay.
adopted in its present form. I don't want it to be a ordinance that is an ordinance that doesn't mean much. It means it's too stringent for the towers of this town. You don't have very many towers in the town, and if you apply all of these things to it, you are not going to get it. There's going to be other things done that may lead to litigation.
We appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank
Who
you.
else would like to be heard on this particular ordinance? Yes, sir, come on up. Welcome. Thank you for your comments.
I wish you all a good holiday.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, sir. Could you just please give us your name and address for the record?
How you doing? My name's Bob Bradley.
Hello, Mr. Bradley.
I've also been towing in this town for quite a long time.
Mr. Bradley, if you could just pull the microphone a little closer, it's kind of sensitive.
Okay.
That's better. Thank you.
And even if, getting back to the titles,
Yes, sir.
I've hired a guy to get titles. costs $350 a car to get a title for,
Okay.
okay? It still has to come back to the police department to get the title, because they're the entity that had the car towed. Okay, so the police department's not out of it.
It's a flawed process.
I mean, we can't get the titles. The police department has to get the titles. Even the guy I hired, it has to go through the police department to get the titles,
Okay.
okay? As far as the rates, they've been, it used to be $50, now it's $250. We've been working off the same rates for the same amount of time, what is it, 15 years or so. The only thing I believe is that the people involved in this who are signing the contract should have the right to write this contract, or at least go over it, okay? I think we should all sit down. It's supposed to be gone over every year, okay? It hasn't been gone over every year. The last meeting we had was approximately 5 years ago. Nothing came out of it. Still the same rates.
Okay.
I think we should all go over it and have a meeting with the police department, with the towers, sit down, go over the rates before it goes through, because there's a lot of issues that have to be gone over.
All right. We appreciate your comments.
Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Who else would like to be heard on this ordinance? Yes, sir. And I would just ask, as others come up, if someone else has already emphasized the point, would appreciate if you would not sort of
Mayor, just
address
a
that
comment
issue.
real
Yes,
quick
sir.
if I could. Like he just said, we did talk about this approximately 5 years ago, and it's basically the same way they talked about it. I wasn't in the meeting, but Officer Fury was involved, and it just unfortunately, it took that long for this to get here. So,
Okay.
it is a while.
Good evening, sir.
My name is Joe Pereira. I live at 59 Westbrook Road, right here in town.
Hello, Ms. Pierre. Welcome.
Thank you. I have a few issues that I'd like to discuss, maybe too many for you because of the hour, so I'll try and cut it short. There's a couple of definitions I think should be added to the ordinance that are not currently part of it. One of them is, I'll read it to you. Recovery is not currently, I don't believe, in the ordinance. And it says, recovery can be achieved by several actions, which may include, but are not limited to, winching and rigging. A recovery is when a tow operator applies his knowledge in a skillful manner to preserve the condition of the motor vehicle while moving damaged vehicle to a towable position. I also believe that under Section 1, it says administrative charges. This should be changed to reflect the following. The charge should be for post-accident services, including but not limited to services such as physical inspection, telephone and/or fax calls, removal of personal items, and additional paperwork. Another item I'd like to touch on, I'm not going to go in order of whatever the ordinance is, I'm just going to jump around, so bear with me. As far as cleanup goes, what should be involved or not involved, under Title 39:4-56.8, the towing service shall not be required to remove any debris or material which may be hazardous, such as oil, gasoline, kerosene, or other petroleum or chemical products or debris or material which the service is not equipped to remove. As far as,
What title was that again?
Can I ask something there?
I don't know if that's
Go ahead,
right,
answer.
Joe, but here it is.
Yeah, who would we have remove it? I'm just
Who would you
asking.
have removed? I guess
That would have to be Monmouth County Hazmat, right?
hazmat, I guess. Hazmat, emergency management.
Emergency management.
This is going to touch on a release, and I'm going to come back to it probably again. NJSA 39:3-40.6. The provisions of the bill require proof of valid motor vehicle insurance prior to the release of an impounded motor vehicle by a state or local law enforcement authority which impounded the vehicle. So that's the township's responsibility if they impound a vehicle to make sure that the vehicle has insurance. And I also believe under the release that the township is asking the tower to have an indemnification clause put in there. On their release, I believe also there should be an indemnification clause indemnifying the tower from any claims due to the township impounding the vehicle. What's right for the tower should be right for the township. Back and forth.
That's fair. That's a very fair comment.
I also believe that in definitions in Section 1, it's not in there, it should be added, a yard charge. And this is what I'll say it means. You can change it or whatever. Shall mean the removal of an automobile or truck from the storage yard at the owner's discretion for the benefit of another towing contractor who is taking the automobile or truck from the storage site, whose vehicle is physically unable to gain access to the automobile or truck while it is inside the storage facility. Okay.
What would that mean
If their truck is too
if you had
big?
a vehicle that you had towed and it was 3 days ago and since then you'd had to tow 3 other vehicles, you had to shuffle those around to get the other vehicle out?
Well, you
That
could
would be
do
the
that too,
storage,
but
the yard
it's
fee?
more or less if the truck is too big. Some trucks are like 4-car carriers,
Right,
and they just won't fit in your yard.
okay.
So you have to bring the car out to the guy so that they can tow the vehicle to take it to the salvage yard or wherever, or another body shop or wherever it's going to.
Okay. What else?
Okay. Section 9B2, facilities, storage facilities shall conform to the land use ordinance. I believe as part of the application process, the land use should give the requirements, whatever the requirements are for a storage facility to come into compliance, or whatever is needed. They should put that as part of the application.
It is. It would be.
It would be,
It would be
okay.
automatically,
Okay,
yes.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
9B4, Mr. Hammer touched on this. The facility that's behind Public Works, I guess that's their storage facility. It's got like the 8-foot fence going around it. On the right-hand side, I guess that's the Township impound yard?
No. No, that's where we store our emergency management vehicles.
To the right-hand side of it?
There's also an impound for us.
There's a police impound? Okay. On December 1st, I went over to that impound yard and I took pictures of it that I have to, if you want to take a look at them. You're asking the storage facility, let's see, to be paved or concrete. The township's yard is not paved or concrete. All these pictures will show you that. It's grass and dirt. Okay? You want to take a look at it, Mr. Howell? The other thing they're asking you for is to have slats in your fence. Township yard does not have slats on their fence.
I think the only,
2 points.
and they're both very good points. I think the only thing that we have is that the township property doesn't abut a residence.
That's fine.
Yeah,
But I'm
there's
just
really-
making a point to say that.
Sure.
Do as I say, not as I do.
It's a very fair
You know what I'm
point.
saying? All right. 9C. They're talking about how much it is per day for storage. I think that it should just say calendar days. Never mind get into it's $2 an hour for this, that, the other. All the days should be the same, and it should be calendar days. They used to have an inside and an outside rate. They don't have that. We have an inside storage facility. There should be an inside rate and an outside rate.
Can I make a recommendation, not to deprive you of your time, because your comments are all,
Yeah.
they're exceptional, quite frankly. I think that a lot of what you're raising, that level of detail, really is something
It's a
that
lot.
should be discussed at that meeting that we talked about with the manager and traffic safety, and that all of these comments really need a hell of a lot more detail, if you will.
Well, that's, I'll give you a little history of the
Hold on,
towing
let me just finish
ordinance.
this one thought.
Go ahead.
And I think that we're not going to be, from a practical perspective, in a position to comment on each one of these observations. And my recommendation to you would be, and we'll hear whoever else would like to be heard unless the council feels differently, is that this meeting should take place with you and the Traffic Safety Division, and that all the comments you're making need to be heard, and that we would rely on the manager and the police department to come back to us with
Well,
their
obviously, it
recommendations.
sounds like you don't really, you're going to pass it no matter what.
No,
That's what it sounds like to me.
I can't make that comment.
But I can tell you this, historically, the towers have gotten together with the police
Agreed.
department,
Yeah, and I think
discussed all the issues.
I think we want to have that.
There's never been a tower that I know of come before the council for any issue with the towing ordinance, because it was always gone over,
Yeah.
and it was done.
Well, and I guess that's my point, is
And
that
I'm Al's son from Al's Auto Body, okay?
we could
Just
see
so
the
you know, all
resemblance.
right?
But
And
let me
I
just-
know because I've been there.
Let me just finish this thought. I think all the points you're raising are good points.
Yeah.
The issue that we have, and it's going to be, I can't speak for what the council is going to do, Maybe they're going to vote against it, maybe it's going to get tabled. I'm not certain what the outcome is going to be, because we haven't finished the public hearing. But I think all the points you're making are good points.
And I wouldn't have to make them if there was a meeting
I
between the police and the towers.
I think
I wouldn't have to be here because it would have been talked about already.
I think the only concern that I would raise is that we have an ordinance that needs to be, desperately needs to be updated. It's not perfect. It needs to be updated.
But not in its present form, Mayor.
Let me just finish. It needs to be updated. It's 5 years old. There are some things in it it's going to address. It's not going to be perfect. I think I can speak for everybody up here that we're anxious to make whatever amendments reasonably need to be implemented, but we're looking at a law that's 5 years old, and that we will be more than interested in entertaining all of your recommendations. They should go to the people that work the detail.
So you don't care?
Quite to the contrary, we do care.
But you're going to ram this through in its present form, and you're going to stick it to the towers?
I don't think that's a fair representation at all.
That's what you're going to do.
I think what we're
Where the
recommending...
storage is involved,
I think what
and unclaimed abandoned vehicles,
I think what we're suggesting...
you're going to jam it to them.
I don't think it's fair to use that term to the
well-
mayor here. I mean, we're listening intently, and we're
Okay.
agreeing with you in a lot of different areas.
You don't
This
realize
thing's
what
gonna need to
the...
be amended, okay?
Okay.
But to sit there and say that we're gonna pass it and jam it down the towers' throats, that's just not true. Please don't make assumptions of what I'm gonna do.
I'm not making assumptions.
You made assumptions, you just did. I'm not, believe me, I'm not, I'm looking at this and I'm looking at it objectively, and I'm listening
Okay,
to you.
okay.
Okay, so,
I appreciate that.
No, I think Councilman Walsh raises a good point. We're all listening to you. We want to get this right. But quite frankly, we got to get some updates made. And I think what I'm suggesting is that we act on what we have here. We have a separate meeting where we listen to all of the details you're going to give, and we allow the police some time. We can't comment on some of these recommendations. They need to be commented by the police, whether or not they're compliant with laws and best practices. We need the manager to get involved. We may need other people from code enforcement. So rather than try and work each one of them, let's get you the forum with the right people who work the detail. When it gets to the governing body, we have to make a policy decision. And I'm not trying to cut you short at all. I think we've
know
been
it's time.
very generous, but I don't know what the council's perspective is going to be, but I think it would be helpful if there was a sidebar discussion with you and the manager and the police, with the other wreckers. Let's act on this tonight, whether it passes, whether it gets defeated, or whether it gets tabled. But regardless of the outcome, we got to get you another opportunity to give us the detail, and that honestly isn't going to be here tonight. And I apologize if you're not happy with that explanation, but I just want to be candid with you that I think that's probably the best course of action.
Thank you.
We appreciate your comments. Would anyone else who'd like to be heard on this ordinance, please come forward. Anyone else who'd like to be heard on this ordinance? You may make a brief follow-up, sure, as long as it isn't on a point that's already been made. Just give us your name again.
Michael Hammer, 232
Okay.
Victory Road. I think part of the problem with expanding community is you create a lot of cars. You create junk cars that are a problem right now. And I think that's part of what I was saying. They're parking cars right up to they're jamming them in, and they can't keep up with them. The police is trying to unload them and deal with this problem.
Yep.
I think it's bigger than just this ordinance. I think you have to deal with the problem of all these abandoned cars that are wrecked, burned cars.
Agreed.
And not only that, once they get a junk title, they start dismantling them and all. It's not right. I'm telling you, it's just not right. You're not doing the right thing. Thank you.
We appreciate your comments. Part of the, I'm going to close the public portion. I'm going to ask for a member of the council so that we can begin the deliberations to please make the appropriate motion and second, just from a parliamentary procedure.
Question for you, Mayor. I mean, Mr. Shernicki, if I may ask, to direct it to him, someone made a comment on that this ordinance is to have a yearly review. Is that by state statute?
Ordinance.
It's by ordinance. Our ordinance states that we must have a yearly review. Then my next question is, if it's taken 5 years to get it to this point, how can we have an ordinance that says, review this on a yearly basis and bring it up to let's say, growth factor because of the way our community has grown, so on and so forth. What are we doing here?
Well, I can't speak to what happened in previous years. I can only speak to issues that were brought to my attention as they were brought to my attention. I would tell you this, that I think this ordinance, from an administrative point of view, from making it current with current problems, is infinitely better than what's currently on the books.
Okay.
At the same time, I would say it's not perfect. So we do need to start making sure we review this annually as we're required to do. But sitting here and listening to everyone, ranging from land use issues to enforcement issues to practical considerations, perhaps there wouldn't be this many issues if we reviewed them every year, but I don't think we're going to achieve perfection here tonight.
No.
But we are giving the police some tools to make some major steps forward.
Right, just so that we can proceed from the parliamentary perspective, just if someone would make the appropriate motion and second, and then we'll debate it among ourselves. Would you make the motion, Cynthia?
You want me to read this?
Yeah, it's at the bottom.
Yeah. Motion ordinance number 0-06-58 be finally passed and adopted, and that notice of its passage and adoption be published in the 12/22/06 issue of the Asbury Park Press by reference to its title only.
We have a motion, we need a second.
Second, Mayor.
Motion and a second. All right, under remarks from the council.
I'll go first.
Go right ahead.
In light of what, and I'm going to speak right to you gentlemen, and then your son left. In light of what the manager has stated, and the fact that Officer McCulloch said that this has taken 5 years, I think that it would be incumbent upon this board to pass this and put this in place. However, I'm going to make a strong suggestion that, and I'd like to hear the comments from the rest of the board in that I would like, and I would be willing to sit in a meeting myself with the manager and all the towers without the police department at the beginning to get a list of all your comments and concerns, because I, for one, feel that the process is flawed somewhere when it comes to being able to get rid of these vehicles. And I'd like to see where, I don't understand the process. That's my feel for this, Mayor, because if it's taken 6 years to get it to this point, I'm not one for tweaking ordinances, nor for putting it in and then putting teeth in it later. But I will be honest with you, I really don't know how the ordinance is stated at the present time, only by what the manager has put forth to us.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Shoemaker. Mr. Malave, we're just going to go right down the line. Do you have specific comments on this?
Yeah. I agree with Cynthia's comments, basically. I think that, like the manager stated, it would give the police department a tool to move forward. It would update the ordinance that hasn't been updated in several years now. Obviously, it could be amended at any given time. With respect and with all due respect to the owners of the towing companies, if we were to bring in and involve every business owner and discuss every ordinance that we're going to put in place that's going to affect their business, we'll never get anything done around here. So obviously we want to be as friendly as possible to the business owner. In the meantime, protect the well-being of the township at large. So I agree that perhaps this has been worked on now for 5 years, as it was stated before and represented to us. Perhaps it's time to move this forward and let that meeting continue and take place, and tweak it as need be.
All right, Councilman Walsh, you have any comments?
A lot of reasons this should be altered, but we also need a starting point. The starting point was years ago. I don't think that cuts it at all. I mean, this town's changed drastically in the last 15 to 20 years. To have something on the books that's 15, 20 years old that really doesn't apply to how Township as it is today, it's kind of ridiculous to me. So, at least this is the place to start. I mean, I've heard many things from a resident, owners of companies. I mean, I see holes here, okay? But you need a place to start, and I don't think something on the books from 20 years ago is the place to start. I'll say this, I thought it was a little bit comical that it was questioned that the fees 20 years ago were 50, while they're going 5 times the amount. I mean, I thought that was comical. I mean, they should have been raised 18 years ago, and 15 years ago, and 10 years ago, and 5 years ago. Yeah, I mean, yeah, everything's went up some. I mean, just because it hasn't been raised in 20 years, and I'm sure that that number was researched from looking at other towns, so. But we need a place to start, and I think Councilwoman Schumacher, stepped up, said she'd be glad to sit in a meeting with you and look at how to try to alter it from there. But we need a place to start.
Administrative part of it.
All right, the other, you have anything else, Mr. Walsh?
And I thought you were his brother. I didn't think you were his father. Just wanted to let you know that.
All right, thank you. I had a technical question, Mr. Chinietsky. Section 5, with respect to insurance, has, and I would imagine that this is the appropriate indemnification, if you will, from the township's perspective, that the joint insurance fund would require with respect to particularly the automobile liability?
Right, and it's consistent with what other municipalities require as well.
Okay. Are there, Mr. Howell, certainly we're interested in your comments as well, sir. Is there anything you'd like to add? Mr. Howell? I'm sorry. Just interested in any comments you'd like to add? Okay. All right, well, at this point in time, I'm going to, are there any other comments, for or against? All right, I would ask that we have a motion and a second. There's no additional comments. Roll call, please.
Mr. Malavey?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Tabasco?
Aye.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. All right, Mr. Chinietsky, as a follow-up, I would please ask that we contact all of the wreckers with whom have a relationship with the municipality, and that as soon as it can be reasonably accommodated, your office arrange a meeting with them and Mrs. Showmaker, who's gracefully volunteered to participate in that discussion. Let's entertain all of their comments. We'd ask that your office, in consultation with the police, review all of their comments and recommendations, and that as soon as practical, you report back to the council with respect to your recommendations for potential amendments to this particular ordinance, because we do want to be sensitive to the wreckers. We are interested in their commentary, and we want this to be as fair an ordinance to all constituencies as possible.
Yes, sir.
So you'll get on that right away?
Yes.
All right, terrific. All right, I'll call the council's attention to 8A5, it's 0659. This is amending the 2006 salary ordinance. While it references the police department, be advised that this is specific to the, just to the contractual matter with the chief of police. Ordinance number 00659, introduced and passed on first reading on 12/5/06 and published according to law, is now being taken upon further consideration in the public hearing. Affidavit of the publication, this ordinance is in the Asbury Park Press issue of 12/8/06 is submitted, and it is noted that a copy of the ordinance has been posted on the bulletin board of the municipal building, and the copies were available to the general public upon request. Ms. Wilman, would you please read the title of the ordinance?
An ordinance of the Township of Howell, Monmouth County, amending an ordinance entitled, an ordinance fixing salary and compensation of certain officers, positions, and employees in the Township of Howell, County of Monmouth, New Jersey, for the year 2007.
Okay, I'm going to open up the meeting to members of the general public if they'd like to make remarks for or against final adoption of this ordinance. Anyone who'd like to be heard, please come forward. Anyone who would like to be heard? All right, seeing no one, I'm going to close the public portion. Member of the council, please proceed.
Motion that ordinance number 06-59 be finally passed and adopted, and that notice of its passage and adoption be published in the December 22nd, 06 issue of the Asbury Park Press by reference to its title only.
All right, we have a motion. We need a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any remarks?
Roll call.
No remarks.
Yes, we can. All right, hearing no additional remarks, roll call, please.
Mr. Malavey?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Tabasco?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes,
Mayor,
please, Mrs.
if I might,
Schumacher.
on 8A6, I asked this to be pulled on the land use signs. Reason being, I have been working with Mr. Jernicki on our adult-oriented businesses, and I would like to put some verbiage, some strong verbiage into our sign ordinance to include addressing those businesses that I think would help us, and so if that's...
So from a parliamentary procedure, if you would please introduce a motion to table 8A6, that will appropriately diminish or end this particular issue, and it can be
We'll carry it
revisited
again.
next year.
It'll carry to next year.
Actually, yeah, I mean, at this point, the end of the legislative session is 12:31, so it would have to be reacted upon. Is anyone, well, you know what, let's, why don't you introduce your motion to table?
I make a motion to table ordinance number 0-06-50 entitled Land Use Signs.
All right, if we have a motion,
Second, Mayor.
we do have a second. Are there any remarks with respect to the motion on the table? Okay, hearing none, roll call on tabling the motion.
Mr. Malave?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Tabasco?
C.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. All right.
Take a break.
Mr. Kramer is here. He's going to give us a very brief overview. He's enjoyed all this deliberation, I'm sure, on all these other items. He's going to speak to us very briefly with respect to the gypsy moth issue. We're then going to take just a real quick recess, and then we're going to come out and do the rest of our business. So why don't you come on up, Mr. Kramer?
Okay, Mayor, if I could just sort of tee this issue up.
Sure.
Last year, we had a gypsy moth infestation, and we had requested the state to undertake an audit and a study of where things are going to fall out next year. We received a letter from the State Department of Agriculture informing us that there's approximately 679 acres in the vicinity of Aldrich Road, just sort of before you get to Route 9. It's a fairly heavy residential area that need to be sprayed by airplane. Now, the cost to us, we estimate it's going to be just shy of about $30,000 to do this, and there's a potential for a 50% grant. However, the county undertakes spraying as well, and they will be doing these in other areas, the really heavy vegetated areas of the township. However, the county won't do that if we do not participate in the Department of Agriculture program. The feeling being that if we don't solve the whole problem, then it's a waste of money doing it in one area. The point being here that there's going to be a significantly dense residential area that's going to be sprayed by airplanes by this particular element that'll kill the larvae. That's about as much as I know technically about it. Mr. Kramer, in addition to being our Public Works Director, is a certified tree expert, and he can talk to us a little bit about what this element is and why it's important, and to give us his recommendation. But tomorrow, we have to let the state know whether or not we're going to proceed.
And you need our
with them.
direction tonight to do that?
Yes, and we're going to need to appropriate sufficient funds in a temporary budget as well.
All right, why don't you come on up, Mr. Kramer? Welcome. Thanks for bearing with us.
Good evening.
If you could just, not to rush you along, but if you could give us as an abbreviated version as possible in your recommendation, please.
Township Manager summarized real quickly, the total acreage to be sprayed by both the state and the county is about 1,700 acres.
Okay.
Of which we would have to pay. The state's portion is just under 700 acres, basically on the Aldridge Road section of town. The county has recommended 31 of the spray blocks by their county helicopter. There's no additional charge for that. It's part of our participation in the county program.
Okay.
Those acreages average from 5 to 30 acres. Both the programs require extensive amount of staff time and the township staff to notify all residents by letter, individual letter to each homeowner in the spray blocks. In the state program, we're responsible for setting up the balloons so the plane knows the area to be sprayed. And the other key factor is we have to coordinate with the schools, both inside Howell and any external school transportation, to make sure that there's no busing operations carried on at the time of the spray program. The material they'll be using is an insecticide, but it's not. It's a Bacillus thuringiensis, BT. It's commonly found in soil on plants, and that's what's used. It's harmless to people. It's just non-toxic.
What's the total financial implication from a budget perspective that you have?
For the state portion, it's $27,000 with a potential to a 50% reimbursement, but there's no guarantee that we're going to get 50. We might get 25.
So worst case scenario is to do this, we need to
come up with
$27,000 in budget funds.
Right.
And when would this actually be executed? What part of the season is this done, in the spring?
Early May.
In early May? Are there any downsides to doing this?
The perception that if somebody sprayed, that
Yeah,
there might...
Mayor, the roads are going to be blocked off, cars won't, we're going to get people off the streets. We will be getting a lot of concerns, so it's going to take an extra effort on the staff and perhaps the Shade Tree Commission to get as much information out to the residents as possible. But as far as I understand this, that the county won't do the rest of the town.
Unless we do this.
Unless we do this.
All right.
Which is a lot of money, a great loss financially if we had to come up with spraying that other area.
The question, the $27,000, does that include the communication expense and postage and what have you to?
No.
No,
All right,
sir.
so what's
That's
the
additional.
estimate to do that? Because it really is more than, then it's obviously more than $27,000.
That I don't know, what it would cost us. I think we would do mailers, we would do stuff on our website, on Howell TV. We would continuously announce it here during the manager's report, when it's happening, what the progress is.
Newspaper.
Newspaper, yeah, we get the messenger out, we'd send flyers home with the children who live in that area.
Okay.
But it would take a concerted effort on our part.
A lot
It's
of
less of
that-
a cost, but more of an effort.
Sure.
Yeah, a lot of that, the sending the flyers home, the school children really won't have a substantial cost. The mailing won't be, the county's taking care of their portion, then I understand, right?
I haven't received it, but I think they do. With the state, we...
Usually the county takes
we-
care, there's the state portion, the 600 or 700 acres, the state is going to do. I don't see the cost. I probably was looking, when we initially met, maybe a $30,000 appropriation to cover, the ancillary costs. Basically, if we pay the cost involved in doing this 700 acres or 670 some odd acres, we get another 1,000 acres done for nothing.
Sure. All right, does any member of the council have a concern or an objection with this? All right, so the policy recommendation for our consideration, and ask someone to entertain a motion, is to appropriate approximately $30,000 to expand our gypsy moth spray protection, which would include an appropriate communication campaign to make our residents aware. So if someone would make that in the form of a motion, we can proceed.
So moved.
We need a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any final remarks? Roll call, please.
Mr. Malavey?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Tabasco?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. Okay, we have your direction. Thank you, Mr. Kramer.
Thank you.
Jeff, how you doing on leaves?
We're going to take a temporary recess. All right, I'm going to reconvene the meeting back to order. We have a quorum, if you will. I'd ask the council to call your attention first to the consent agenda items. We've acted on the AST contract. I would ask that members of the council just quickly peruse the balance of the consent agenda items, including the motions, and please let me know, accepting 9B12, which has already been acted upon, if there's any item anyone would like a separate vote on.
No, do I make a comment at this time, or no? Not until we make a motion.
Not until we make a motion.
Okay.
Does anyone want a separate motion, though, on any of the consent agenda items? Okay. All right, so I would ask for a motion and then a second, please, for consent agenda items, which include the add-ons that we've already voted to add on in addition to the 9C motions.
So moved.
We have a
Second.
motion, we have a second. Under remarks.
Mayor, if I may, under motions, under junkyard licenses renewal for 2007, there's 3 for John Blewett. There is a notation in here on the property that was recently sold by Mr. Blewett's Junkyard to Robertsville Development Corporation, Ben Kirsch. I did, Penny got me the number to Mr. Blewett's home, and I did not speak to him, but I spoke to, I think it was his daughter, and she told me that that property was sold, but the license was not sold with that property. I think that was some concern.
You mean the junkyard license?
The junkyard license. So he owns all 3 licenses. And would this be the appropriate time to ask the question to Mr. Gannon, if I may, Mayor?
Go right ahead.
I would like to know if we can stipulate an ordinance that we will only issue 3 junkyard licenses in the Township of Howell, so that no other licenses can be created or issued.
In our junkyard ordinance, it allows for 4, and what's being requested is that it be changed to 3, and we discussed that, and that's possible.
Yeah, I don't think there's a problem, assuming that this last, the one, is this the one on 9 by,
Yep, that was only, there was only currently 3, and Blewett holds all 3. That's why I would like to not, that's why I think we should just change the ordinance to stipulate.
okay, so that you're saying there's one out there that's like a pocket license? Nobody's using it?
He has all 3 of them right now.
But I mean, it allows for 4?
Who owns the 4th?
No one.
All right, so what you're recommending as a sidebar is to pass an ordinance so that we can limit it to the 3 that exist right now and not have the capacity for a 4th.
That's correct.
Actually, it would be 2.
Or 2, yes.
Well, that's the issue. Are they abandoning that last one?
Well, that's what I don't know. What they did is they're renewing it.
Is it actively, what's I'm saying, is that the one on Route 9 by the,
That license was not sold with that property. They hold the license.
Right, there's with respect to Block 135, Lot 21 and 22, the recommendation is that we not approve that particular license for a number of reasons. One is that it hasn't been used as a junkyard for 3 years. 2, the applicant is no longer the owner, and the ordinance requires that the owner sign off on the application, which hasn't happened.
Okay, so then we would only have, then we would be only renewing for the 2 then?
Correct.
And stipulate that the township would only hold 2 and get rid of the other 2.
That has to be an ordinance amendment.
Right, so we need,
but I think at this point, too, we should just do not pass that one where there's an issue whether or not it's an ongoing junkyard and the license been suspended. Maybe have the code enforcement people go out there and do a report on what the use is and hold off. So there's only two licenses approved at this point, then we can deal with the ordinance.
but I do want that on.
Yep.
ASAP.
Yeah, well, that definitely, but I mean, we can't go to 2. You want to go from, if there's 3 active, if it goes down to 2, should the ordinance be amended to just provide for 2? Okay.
Yes.
All right, so the recommendation is, aside from this, is that we separately have management take a look at updating for next year an ordinance that amends the number of junkyards that are permissible in the town. So Mr. Chudnetsky will look into that, and he'll get back to us in the next legislative year. All right, are there any other comments with respect to the resolutions or the motions?
Just that I informed the Chamber of Commerce that I would inform you of their desire not to see that Route 9 license renewed.
Okay, we appreciate that. Any additional comments from the council with respect to these particular items? Okay, hearing none, we had a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Malabay?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Tabasco?
Oui.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. Okay, just very quickly, we're not going to be acting this evening on these future discussion items, assembly resolution, tax revaluation, the neighborhood traffic management policy, and the regulation of the sex-oriented businesses. We are now going to call our attention to a review pursuant to ordinance of professional services for calendar year 2007. Now, we sort of blazed a new trail last year when we passed the ordinance that requires us to publicly bid all of the professional services. And just briefly, for the benefit of the council, we have a provision in our code, which is Chapter 18, Ethics and Code of Conduct, Provision 18-2 is the performance-based negotiation professional services contract. So we have an ordinance requirement to review the different services that have been bid. It's been explained to the council and I that we have an urgent need to act this evening, at least on beginning to review the credentials for township attorney, deputy township attorney, municipal prosecutor, and the public defender. It's my understanding that we would use this evening as an opportunity to vet through the applications that we have, and that, should it be the intention of the council, that on January 1st, we would make whatever appointments might be appropriate based on the commentary this evening. What we did last year, if that is of any value, was that I simply went through and read into the record the highlights of each of the individual contracts. We made certain that the contracts had satisfied all of our professional bidding requirements, which has likely already been authenticated by the procurement department. And then at that point, we opened up a dialogue relative to each of these individual agreements. We do have a number of them, and so what I might recommend is we start, unless anyone feels differently, with the township attorney. Are we okay with starting with that, township attorney?
Yeah, let's go right down the line.
All right. In accordance with our ordinance, I'll just briefly review all of the individuals that have applied pursuant to our municipal law. The first one I happen to have here, in no particular order, is a application for township attorney from Caroline Casagrande. She resides in the borough of Matawan. She's an associate with the firm of Cleary, Alfieri, Jones, and Hoyle. It appears as if she has provided the appropriate documentation with respect to the non-collusion affidavit. They provided the disclosure of ownership form. There are three principal owners of the firm: James Cleary, Salvatore Alfieri, and Linda Grasso Jones. They've also provided the appropriate documentation with respect to the professional liability insurance. They provided the mandatory equal opportunity employment notice and their New Jersey Certificate of Employment report. They've indicated here that Carol Casagrande apparently would be performing the primary duties of the attorney. She apparently specializes in litigation and local government. She currently serves as the Associate Borough Attorney in Fairhaven. She also serves as Chief Negotiator and Labor Counsel for Fairhaven. Apparently, she has been involved in various public entities, including County of Monmouth, Sheriff's Office, Dover Township, Keensburg, Fairhaven, and she assists James Cleary at the Joint Insurance Fund litigation. Apparently, Mr. Cleary would act as a backup in an advisory and alternate role. They have included various references. They're all attached. They've indicated that the staff has 7 attorneys, 5 paralegals, primary office in Matawan, which I believe is in Monmouth County. They talk about they have a law library. They've given us their curricular vitae. And with respect to fees, which we need to read into the record, they indicate that no retainer is required. All attorney services will be billed at the rate of $135 an hour. All paralegal services will be billed at $60 per hour. Reimbursement is required for expenses including copying and postage. And they have given us the acknowledgement of corrections, additions, and deletions form. So that is the first one. The second one I have, in no particular order, Andrea I. Baser. Andrea I. Baser, residing in Ocean Township, Monmouth County. She is applying for the position of Township Attorney and the Deputy Township Attorney. Her address, I guess her business address appears to be 2 Windsor Lane. She's provided the appropriate material with respect to her insurance requirements, her professional liability, her mandatory equal opportunity employment notice, her business registration certificate. She's indicated that her office is 90 West Main Street, Freehold, New Jersey. She has provided, with respect to fees, that she would do this for a flat fee, $75,000 a year. She's indicated that she has 15 years of professional legal experience, 10 of which involved representation of Monmouth County. She served as law clerk for Civil Division, New Jersey Superior Court judges. She worked as an associate for the firm of Valence, Goldman, and Spitzer. And she started her own firm as an independent contractor, working for several attorneys. In '06, Monmouth County Board of Chosen Freeholders appointed her as Special Monmouth County Counsel for General Matters, and she moved her office to Ocean Township and Freehold. She includes references from the county clerk, county sheriff, county surrogate, and it does not indicate how many attorneys are in her office. It appears as if she is a solo practitioner. although it doesn't say anything different. She indicates that she has this flat $75,000 a year amount. It does indicate that she would bill $155 an hour, and then paralegal at $75, secretarial at $25, but it's a not to exceed $75,000.
Mayor, if I could just clarify that pretty quick. I had opportunity to be privileged to a discussion with Mrs. Baser. She was under the impression that it was 75,000, and if it exceeded 75,000, it would go back to the 155 an hour. It wasn't.
Okay.
She misunderstood.
Gotcha.
So it would not be a flat fee of 75,000, then we'll revert back to the 155.
Okay. All right, that's an important clarification. So it's $75,000, and once she goes through that amount, she would then begin to bill at $155 an hour.
So about February 14th, Valentine's Day.
Okay. The next is the firm of Thomas Gannon, Dover Township, Ocean County, attorney at law, Herring, Gannon, and McKenna. Mr. Gannon's firm has provided the appropriate documentation with respect to owners of the firm. He's provided the appropriate acknowledgement with respect to his insurance, mandatory equal opportunity form, his certificate of employment information report, his New Jersey business registration. He has provided his professional services entity requirements, including all of the experiences of the firm, different municipalities that they've represented, various references. They've indicated a billable rate of $120 an hour for all of the associates, plus any out-of-pocket expenses. And obviously, Mr. Gannon's firm has, at least in my judgment, served this municipality most admirably in the last 4 years, and prior to that, his firm did do services for the municipality in the late 1990s. The next is a submission from Stuart J. Moskowitz. Mr. Moskowitz works for the law offices of Stuart A. Moskowitz. He is a solo practitioner. He's the principal of attorney. He's indicated he would be the person responsible for representing the township. He's indicated that he has other attorneys he's worked with who could fill in as deputy. In 2005, he served as township attorney in Manalapan. Prior to that, he worked for the firm of McGowan and Moskowitz, an attorney in the borough of Sayreville. And as for his experience, he's been practicing law since 1973. He gives us a general background of his experience. And he does provide various references from different municipalities in which he's worked and other firms. He's given his cost, which is $150 an hour, and a paid salary for attending meetings. Says he would agree to perform whatever rate of compensation for hourly work is currently being paid in Howell. So I guess he's saying he'd do $150, or whatever the hourly rate is we're paying now. He's indicated a not to exceed for $275,000. There's an explanation here about his services in other towns where he had been billing $400,000 a year, but he would do it for less. So I guess this is a not to exceed $275,000 at whatever billable hour. He provides his non-collusion affidavit, his disclosure of ownership, his insurance requirements and acknowledgement, mandatory equal opportunity notice. He's provided his certificate of employment and his New Jersey Division of Business Registration certificate. The next is application for township attorney and/or deputy township attorney from the law offices of Beekman and Beekman. They are located in Neptune, New Jersey. They have provided their appropriate mandatory equal opportunity form. They provided their business registration certificate, Americans with Disabilities Act, and as it relates to their specifics, it's Donald Beekman, residing in the township of Neptune, as the owner managing partner of the firm Beekman and Beekman. There are two principal owners of the firm. They have provided all of the necessary insurance and other materials as already noted. They provided their professional credentials and their legal experience in the backup materials we've all seen. They have indicated, it would appear as if Mr. Donald Beekman would be the primary. His services would be billed at $150 an hour. The services of Jeffrey Beekman at $120, paralegal at $75 an hour. They would use the same billable rates when acting as deputy, and they would look for a retainer of $40,000 per year. The retainer would include phone conferences with manager, clerk, CFO, review of meeting agenda minutes, preparation of attendance in all regular meetings, as well as phone conferences with members of the township governing body and/or township mayor. So it's $40,000 plus their billable rates as noted. It's Beekman and Beekman. The next is law firm of Ernest Bongiovanni, Wall Township resident, Monmouth County, New Jersey. The firm Bongiovanni and Pavlik, applying for township attorney and deputy township attorney. Two principal owners, Ernest Bongiovanni and Alex Pavlik, offices on Route 9 in Howell. They provided their appropriate insurance requirement and acknowledgement, mandatory equal opportunity notice, state of New Jersey business registration form. They have also indicated their credentials. They have indicated additional full-time secretary would be hired. They've indicated, going in order of the material, a not-to-exceed amount of $300,000. This amount is based on projections, based on annual payments to Howell's Township Attorney in recent years. Amount may vary owing to fluctuation in the litigation. It says $120 an hour plus expenses and a $15,000 annual salary for attendance at 3 meetings per month. So it would appear as if it is a potential $300,000, but that could fluctuate depending on matters of litigation. They provided their professional credentials, their resumes, various references. They've given legal experience of the firm for Mr. Bongiovanni, Mr. Pavlik. They have provided their acknowledgement and corrections and their other insurance information. Next is Kevin N. Starkey, Bricktown, New Jersey. He's with the firm of Starkey, Kelly, and Bauer. They're applying for, Starkey, Kelly, Bauer, Kennelly, and Cunningham. Township Attorney and Deputy Township Attorney. They've indicated the various owners of the firm who have interest. They have provided their professional insurance. They provided their mandatory equal opportunity, their professional services form. They have provided their acknowledgement of corrections, certificate of employment, state of New Jersey certificates, although I'm looking for the hourly rates.
$165 an hour.
Where is it? Okay. I'm sorry, yep. There's an addendum document that indicates that they're actually they're submitting proposals for multiple jobs. Township Attorney, Utility, and Tax and Labor, which we're not getting into tonight. As Councilwoman Showmaker points out, the hourly rate is not to exceed $165. The firm would bill the township for out-of-pocket expenses and expenses incurred, such as expert fees, court costs, accountants, appraisers' fees, service fees, investigator fees, deposition costs, and messenger services. They would also bill for photocopying at a rate of 20 cents a page. Excess postage, certified mail, registered mail, other necessary expenses are billed at the actual rate. Overnight delivery at $25. And that's Starkey, Kelly, Bauer, Canali, I believe, and Cunningham. And then the last for Township Attorney, James H. Gorman, Attorney at Law, applying for a position of Township Attorney. And his offices, he resides in Homedale. His offices are not listed.
Shrewsbury.
Sorry, Shrewsbury, thank you. It appears as if it is a solo practitioner firm. James H. Gorman, he's provided his appropriate certificates for insurance, mandatory equal employment, certificate of information, his business registration certificate, professional services information form, He has provided his resume and all of the clients for whom he has served in a municipal capacity. His hourly rate is $140 an hour. A retainer is requested for attendance at meetings. And that, unless I'm missing anyone, those are the bidders. Is there anyone I've missed, Mr. Trinyetsky?
No, sir.
All right, so if I might recommend, just to help us get through this, is there a particular firm that anyone would like to go through, or we have a preference for large firms, small firms? What's the pleasure of the council? Mr. Howell, we would certainly welcome your very detailed engagement on this particular topic.
Thank you, Mayor.
What's the pleasure of the council?
Pardon me, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Just the attorney, our present attorney, do you want him to stay for this discussion, or do you want to give him an opportunity to maybe cut out of here?
It's Larry's last night, let me slander him while he's here.
Just for appearance sake, you're discussing contracts.
We are.
He had offered, I didn't want him to make him feel unwelcome.
Of course.
Of course, he's always welcome, but you are discussing contracts, so for appearance sake,
It's probably
it's your
appropriate that
call.
he stick around, in case we have a question about whatever.
Okay.
I have some questions about this in general from speaking.
Go right ahead, sir.
Okay, by law, do we have to extend benefits and pension to whoever we hire?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Do we have the ability, are we allowed to call people from these firms and see whether or not they will accept the position if it was offered to them, knowing they will not, if they were not to get pension?
Mr. Filiacci, you want to comment?
I just want to point out, because I was listening to some of the proposals. Some of the proposals call for a retainer. If that retainer is done in the form of a salary, you have no choice. They must be offered, they must go on the pension in accordance with the pension rules. If it's more than $1,500 in a year, under the current rules of the pension. So the decision here is under those retainers, I think there were some in there that had retainers for certain fixed amounts for some meeting attendance. The decision, the discussion with those professionals would have to be that they would be in the form of a fee and not a salary.
Okay. And are all of these professionals, prosecutor, public defender, attorney, deputy township attorney, can all of them be extended a fee and not a salary?
When you mean, Councilman, when you mean a fee, you mean just come up with an annual amount?
Mr. Filiatro just said to me, if you extend them a salary above $1,500,
Right.
that they must be able to go into the pension system. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
But if you give them $10,000 and you said it was a fee and not a salary, you do not have to extend them to be in the pension. Correct, Mr. Filiatro?
That is correct.
So that's where I got the word fee from, was from him.
A retainage fee.
Okay.
Right.
A retainage fee rather than making it a salary? I mean, is there really a distinction if we just call it a fee? So we call it a fee, they would not be eligible for
If you're going to
pension.
call it a fee, then my presumption would be they will be paid on a purchase order, as
Okay.
they would for something an hourly rate. They would not be an employee of the township.
Good.
Do any of these professionals have to, by law, be employees of the township?
No.
I do believe we did look years back. I think the prosecutor, the defender, the judge meet the IRS requirements that they must be employees because we exert too much control over them. And they do fall in the IRS realm of being employees and not contractors.
Well, to further that point, the judge clearly is an employee. And the judge is, the judge has always been an employee, I think, by statute. I mean, he's an employee of the township. He's appointed from time to time by the governing body.
Well, he's not up for discussion. We just appointed him for 3 years, I believe,
That's
in
right.
June.
We
correct?
did. So that's not an issue, but you're saying that you think that the prosecutor and the public defender are qualified as employees?
We did look at them, probably 94, 95, it's been a while, but there are like 25 tests that IRS publishes a sheet, and there's 25 tests over what is a subcontractor versus an employee. And I believe because we tell these people that they have to be at the court dates, that you know, the judge is holding court, and they have specific times and specific jobs to do, that we exert enough control over their actions that they fall within the IRS definition of an employee.
Okay? But they don't have to be there. They could be fired like anybody else who didn't show up for their job. Is that not correct, sir? I mean, if I have a job, I work for an employer, I could be fired if I don't show up. And not in my case, let's not get carried away. Okay? What?
Sorry. My suggestion would be to have to look at our ordinance too, to see how the job is structured. Which I haven't done.
I would really like that to happen, so that I could have a better feel for how to guide my questions on whoever I call. I mean, I'd like to call and speak to everyone.
We'll get you an answer tomorrow.
Okay, that's important to me.
Well, I mean, it's a very valid point. My preference would be that we not extend pension and health benefits, that it's the responsibility of an external contractor to have to provide for that on their own.
I think the notion of benefits is always negotiable. I would just say that from my experience, the prosecutor and defender have always been employees.
All right, so you'll look into that and you'll get back to us.
You
Okay.
can negotiate, you know, what benefits they have.
Well, see, the difficulty that we have from a Department of Labor perspective, we have to be very careful about non-discriminatory provisions from a benefits point of view, how they're treated, because if we have to set them up as separate classes, and theoretically, since we're not in the state health benefits plan, we could create a process that excludes them from being benefit eligible, so long as we had a policy that separated them as a class of employee.
And I think the hours would qualify for that as well.
Well, did they do...
In terms of not being eligible automatically for benefits.
Do they put in 35 hours, at least 35 hours a week? Yeah, then if that's the case, then they're part-time employees, and the township does not provide coverage for part-time employees for health benefits.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the way around that from a policy perspective. Part-timers are ineligible for health benefits.
Right. Now, again, just some experience has been that, again, they've been employees, and often, you know, we make the, you could offer the benefit and have it paid back. You know, sometimes, you know, that's a good package, that they like, you know, the type of product we have, but they buy it from us essentially as employees, and that's something that part-timers can do as well.
The only concern I would raise from an insurance perspective, it creates sort of an adverse risk, because the only people that will agree to buy it would be those that need it, and they're going to select against our risk pool.
Okay.
So, and it's a policy decision for the council, but my personal recommendation would be, whoever we hire for any of these positions, there's no pension and there's no health benefits. You get that someplace else. You're an independent contractor. Township engineer's not getting, you know, whoever our current township engineer or planner, they're not getting the health benefits and pension.
Okay. We'll verify for the council tomorrow whether or not there's a requirement that those two particular positions be on payroll.
Well, I believe Mr. Filiaccio gave me a list of 6 or 7 professionals that are in our pension system right now. And I want it to be clear if they have to be.
Understood.
I don't care what's customary and usual, what's been done in the past. Do they have to be? Is the definitive answer I would like.
I think the definitive answer is if they are salaried, they must be.
Well, then, all right, then definitively, can I choose to say, I don't want to give anybody a salary, I do not want them in the pension system or the health benefits?
And that's what we'll get back to you tomorrow.
Well, I think the answer is yes. If we decided that we wanted to hire a township attorney, and we didn't want to have them on a salary, and we said, we're just going to pay you hourly fees. If the hourly fee isn't enough to cover your expenses, this might not be the place for you.
Right. But if it's required that they're salaried, then we can't get around the pension laws.
Different. If it's required that they be paid a salary, then that's a different issue. And I think that would really only apply to the public defender and the prosecutor. But the township attorney clearly is a subcontractor.
Absolutely.
Who we can decide what fee we want to pay him.
Like that, we're 99.9% sure about that one, 100% sure
Yeah, well-
that the town attorney,
Is that right, Mr. Gannon? I mean, you serve in the
the town
capacity.
attorney does not,
That's correct.
Okay, so we don't have to worry
Salary.
about what we're talking about now, the township attorney.
Yeah.
Are there-
I'm not mad at you, Mr. Gannon.
Well, I was going to ask for a raise, yeah.
I think you did in one of these proposals that I was
I
looking
think
at.
I did one.
Yeah, I think you did, that's okay.
Just so you understand, in this township, and it's historically been so, that there's a fee paid, and I split with my partner for going to the meetings, and that's $15,000. Okay? And as part of that $15,000, there's a pension contribution, so it is pensionable. So that's a decision you have to make. I mean, the flip side of it, you know, we've calculated that it probably saves the town $25,000, $30,000 a year.
Well,
Because if we were to bill by the hour, now, of course, if under the new regime, if everybody's out of here by 9 o'clock, you probably wouldn't save as much. But when we calculated our hours, and we looked at it, so I'm not making a sales one way or the other, but I'm saying, we know when I'm here to 12:30, that if I start here at 6:30, and I'm billing 120 an hour, you know, it comes. So that's the flip side of that. We take 15,000, and we've internally calculated that we probably lost 20,000. But I'm not saying poverty or anything else, but I'm saying there's a flip side to that too. If you were paying me 50,000 to go to the meetings, then I'd say, hey, you're better off. So,
it's not about you, it's not about you personally.
No,
It's a process. Whether it's you or somebody else, your point is, by having some sort of a retainer, it precludes us from 3 times a month calculating what could be 20 hours worth of
Right.
meeting time that we're not getting billed at an hourly rate.
So Howell Township, in my opinion, and I dealt with a lot of towns, is pretty efficient that way. Because other
me
towns
just ask
might be
for-
40,000.
Just
and
a
that's not-
one-minute pause. Mr. Tabasco and Mr. Malave, in deference to them, really are not going to have an influence on the final outcome of this. So I think, lateness of the hour, these two fine gentlemen are going to be able to exit the chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Phil.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy New Year.
Answer your
It's
question,
a real pleasure.
Mr. Walsh.
Take that pizza.
You don't, nobody has to be on the pension. That's the bottom line, unless there's some kind of statute that I don't know about.
And we could give him a $15,000 fee
Yes.
instead of a $15,000 salary.
I think that, you'd have to structure it correctly, but I think it's probably doable.
Okay.
So that's something that you could look at for us?
Yeah, you'd have to structure it to make sure the state's not looking for their piece of the
All
pie.
right. So the other follow-up is, if you guys can take a look at, can we structure, rather than call it a retainer, call it a flat professional consulting fee, if you will?
You would just you would do a contract with a flat fee for attendance at meetings.
Okay.
And then litigation, anything else.
Attendance fee instead of a retainer.
Instead of a retainer, call it something else, you don't have to qualify for salary.
Right.
All right, let me just get everybody's attention back to the various petitions that we have for these positions. Good night, fellas, I'll talk to you tomorrow. What we had done last year, this does not mean that it might be the right thing to do, but at least the three of us were up here. We went through sort of a process of elimination where we said, here are the firms we're interested in to have as finalists. Now, I had a little bit of an opportunity to go through these. It's whatever the pleasure of the council is. Are there any in here that we just don't believe, comfortable with, that we want to sort of narrow this down to 1 or 2 finalists? You know what, I'll be the first, because I know this is an icebreaker kind of discussion. I'm generally concerned with solo practitioners.
That was my comment.
And primarily because the depth and the complexity that this municipality requires, we've got multiple attorneys in court at the same time. We have multiple people handling multiple meetings at the same time, and it's an awful lot of work for a solo practitioner that might not have an in-house associate, an in-house paralegal, and while these may be phenomenally qualified individual attorneys, I just don't know how they would be able, as solo practitioners, to handle the duties of what is geographically the largest town in the county. And so my only observation is, I think there's maybe one or two, maybe there's even three, that are solo practitioners. I just don't know how they could do the work.
Beazer, Moskowitz, and Gorman, I think.
I think you're right. I think that's exactly who it is.
Right, it's
So
the
it's a
bottom
girl.
three on that, in that section.
Andrea Baser is
You have that
also.
spreadsheet?
Yeah, I have it here someplace.
Andrea Baser's a solo.
Baser, all right, so and it's whatever the council decides to do, but Baser was a solo practitioner,
Gorman.
Gorman is a solo, and Moskowitz.
Right.
So, I mean, do we, just from a policy perspective, is there an agreement or disagreement that we got to have somebody that's got a little bit of bench depth in the office?
I'm okay taking them out.
Okay,
I've looked at them pretty thoroughly.
all right. Mrs. Showmaker, I mean, just to try and narrow through this a little bit,
I will just
it would be Gorman, Moskowitz, and Baser. Those are the three that are solo practitioners. Mr. Howell, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree 100%, Mayor.
Can we negotiate some of these fees down too?
Of course we can.
Like, I do have a hard time with Beekman and Beekman asking for $7 an hour for their staff.
Yeah, I mean, last year, if you guys remember, at least Mr. Walsh and Mrs. Showmaker, I remember specifically with bond counsel, we wanted to maintain the same bond counsel, but we found the rate to be objectionable, and we dispatched Mr. Davis and Mr. Filiatro to tell them, here's the rate, and if you're unwilling to accept it, we'll hire somebody else. So my perspective is all of this is completely negotiable.
I just want to check.
Yeah. All right, so from a process perspective, it appears as if Ms. Baser, Mr. Moskowitz, and Mr. Gorman, at least for now, we're going to put them to the side. So we've narrowed it to Beekman, Casagrande,
Casagrande, that's the Cleary Alfieri, right?
you're right, I'm sorry, that's Cleary.
I'm looking at the way it's listed on the spreadsheet.
It's Cleary, Alfieri, Jones, and Hoyle, Beekman and Beekman, Bongiovanni and Pavlik, Starkey, Kelly, Bauer, Kennelly, and Cunningham, and that's it. Those would be the four.
Five, man.
Is it five?
Beekman, Gannon, Bongiovanni,
I'm sorry, geez,
Starkey,
what did I
Cleary.
do? And Gannon and Herring.
Tom Gannon.
Gannon, Herring, McKenna.
Toss him out too.
How soon you forget?
All right, why don't we start with the one that's right on top of my pile. Cleary, Alfieri, Jones, and Hoyle. Any comments, concerns?
Ahmed, that's the one that, it's Casagrande?
That appears to be, yeah, I mean, the firm is Cleary, Alfieri, and Jones, and apparently, I guess Caroline Casagrande would be the person that they would assign to the town, and I think they indicated that the backup would be James Cleary. Now,
All right, so just from looking at the paperwork, they're going to send an associate here, not a partner, and then the associate's going to go back when she has questions and ask the partner.
I read it, and you could be right, Mr. Howell, I read it as she's going to be the primary, but when she has a conflict or she can't make the meeting, that's when Mr. Cleary would get involved.
Right, because I'm, just on the non-collusion, they have her listed as an associate.
They do, yeah, she's not an owner.
She's not a principal.
She's definitely not a principal of the firm.
I'll just make a strong comment, since I'm the senior elder here, that I think that a town of this size, we need to have a partner involved,
That's where I was
so that
going.
they have the experience for a township of this size.
Well, in the spirit of full disclosure, Salvatore Alfieri was the township's public defender for 2 years. And we, Cynthia and I, participated in his appointment 1 year, 2004.
Was he the public defender, or was he the alternate public defender?
No, he
What
was.
the question when
he was
came to the planning board?
He was the actual public defender, which in conflict situations is the only position that allows you to also do private township work.
Okay.
He was in that role for 1 year.
All right.
So your concern, Mrs. Showmaker, is that we need a partner, and that while Ms. Casagrande could be phenomenally qualified, we want somebody with a little juice here. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, that may sound biased.
I understand. And you tend to, you seem to
I
agree with
tend to
that?
agree that,
Mr.
yeah.
Walsh? Not that we need to disqualify these guys
Yeah,
now,
I
but...
mean, you know, I'm going to call each of these that we have left. I have some questions I want to ask them. I want some stuff clarified by Mr. Filiaccio and Mr. Chernecki. I'm close.
And it's 12:30?
But I'm going to do the best. I don't have I have no problem with the thinking method. I'm okay with that. So I have questions to ask, so.
The flip side of a partner versus usually
An
an associate is that usually their rates are a little different. I know when I go to my attorney's office, if I go to him or I go to his associate, there's a huge difference in hourly rates. I will say that for you. One of the things, and if I can just move on to this Starkey, Kelly, and Bauer, I was a little bit appalled by their hourly rate. And do we not have a contract ceiling, a ceiling that we have adhered to as a practice?
We have, in the last 3 years, we set a cap.
Correct.
We said, this is the cap, and then when there was an issue and the professional needed to go through the cap because, whatever, unanticipated legal expenses, we wanted a different project, they would come to us and say, we need to go over that cap amount, and then we would vote on it project by project. I mean, I tend to agree with you. I think their hourly fee certainly seems to be out of whack. I mean, if you compare it, not to embarrass him, but when you compare it to Tom Gannon, Tom's at 120 an hour, these guys are at 165. So, I mean, that's not to suggest we couldn't go back to these guys if we thought that they were the best qualified attorneys.
I looked at that too, because that number kind of hit me in the chop pretty hard, but then I went through it, and in that addendum in number 4, it said the hourly rate for attorneys for this representation will be in an amount set by the township's governing body, but not in an amount to exceed 165.
Right, so we could certainly...
go back to them and say,
Of course.
Look,
hey, look, this is...
if we really felt that the Starkey firm was, was the best qualified law firm out there, we could bring them in and say, look, we'll pay you $125 an hour. If those are acceptable, you're hired. If they're not, then you're not hired.
One of the things that impressed me about that Starkey firm, though, was the amount of municipal law experience that they had.
Yes, they do have some.
They have a tremendous amount of experience in municipal law, so I will make, that was my comment on that one. Under Bon Giovanni and Pavlik, I question the size of their firm and the capabilities of handling our township of our size. And also, I was a little concerned, which once again, we can go back to the board on their rates, not to exceed 300,000, but if you notice, there's an asterisk that says,
Yeah, well, it can change.
that the amount may vary owing to fluctuation in litigation and other variables such as emergent matters. Well, Mr. Bon Giovanni and Mr. Pavlik have been involved in our town off and on for many years, so, and they are quite knowledgeable of the amount of litigation that this town has and has had. So I was a little concerned by the footnote on their annual rate that they were soliciting.
Well, let me ask a question. Are we, my sense is we may want to bring in
I think we should.
a handful of these firms and meet with them and interview them and get to meet some of the people that they may want to send here, if you will. Because other than Tom Gannon, we don't know any of these people. I mean, I'll freely admit, I certainly know Mr. Bon Giovanni, I certainly know Mr. Alfieri. I don't know any of these other people. So me personally, if we're going to make a change, I'm going to want to meet who the top person is. I'm going to want, quite frankly, our manager to meet who the top person is, because they're going to be working on a day-to-day basis a hell of a lot more than we will from an interaction perspective. So, and I want to be clear about this, I'm certainly partial to Tom Gannon. I'm not going to make any bones about it. I'd be thrilled if he was our township attorney for as long as he was in practice. So I want to be clear, I say that from a position of bias. But what we might have to do, just in deference to the calendar, is we may not be in a position to appoint one of these new firms come January, because we're not meeting again between now and January 1st. So might the council consider, and we probably need to query Ms. Dalton, but might the council consider, if Mr. Gannon would agree, is to just keep him on sort of an interim basis so that we can bring these firms in, maybe the first meeting in January, interview them and make a decision. Because we obviously have to continue to operate come January 1st, and unless we have another meeting between now and January, there's no way we're going to be able to meet these people. And I could be off base on this, and, you know, it's clearly not going to be my call.
I don't know, I think we had time. I mean, I'm willing to meet them over the Christmas break.
I'll be on vacation.
I mean, if you want to do that, we have no meeting January 2nd.
Well, that was my point. We could bring them in on January 2nd, but come January 1st, if we have ongoing things, I mean, I have no problem at all doing it on January 2nd. Bring them all in on January 2nd, interview anybody we want from a finalist's perspective, and make the appointment on January 2nd.
I thought the meeting was the 1st.
Well, it is.
It is the first. We can have a special.
We have a special meeting on January 2nd if we have to.
Do we have to meet them all, or can we call them individually? What's the law, Tom?
I would say that you could probably,
Tom, would you just move in a little closer?
You could probably call them on a one-on-one basis, but I guess the idea is to have a collective type of understanding of everything, so you'd have to make sure the other people know, you know, what they said or whatever. I mean, you could do that possibly.
Can I say this collectively, we didn't have them all come in last year.
We didn't.
We did not.
Well, what I'm saying is that the fair and open process, at least maybe come January 1st, you should be able to, everybody share the knowledge, so to speak.
We can share the knowledge by making a phone call if we want.
Right, if you said to somebody, well, would you take the job for X, and they said yes, you know, then obviously you'd have to tell everybody on the council if that's what the issue was.
I have a really important question.
Go ahead.
In light of all the big bucks you get paid, Mr. Gannon, now, my concern is, as has been done in the past, if indeed we change attorneys, do the files of the existing and open, if the existing files stay with Mr. Gannon, so as not to, because that was done in 1 year, which cost a tremendous amount of money, all the files, opened or closed, went to the new person, which had to be re-reviewed, the whole 9 yards. Will that occur, or are we going to stay with any of the open, anything open stays with Mr. Gannon, and then you segue into the new?
I have nothing against Mr. Gannon. Personally, I have nothing against Mr. Gannon or his work.
I think what's happened in the past, at least with my firm, when we've taken over, we've sat down and looked at the status of the files that are presently in litigation. And if I recall, the governing body put its trust in me, and I did basically say it would not be cost efficient for my firm to take over these various litigations.
From a historical perspective, when the Chabelle Many firm was replaced, we actually allowed them to continue on matters that were deep enough into litigation that it didn't make sense to start over and have Tom's firm get up to speed at our price. So we allowed them to finish the ones that made sense for them to finish, and then whatever new stuff came up, or if it was a brand-new case that just started a week earlier, then, Mr. Gannon's firm picked it up.
I think that's an important policy decision. If you're going to start interviewing firms, you need to know whether you're going to be interviewing, what you're interviewing for. And if you make a policy decision to leave the open cases with the current firm, then those are issues that are being handled, and you can redirect your questions into other areas.
Well, do we generally agree that if it's something that is 6 months into work or 2 years, I mean, we're not going to give, I would think, we wouldn't turn over to the new township attorney, if it isn't Tom Gannon, the Lackey case. I mean, my God, we're we're 8 years into this damn thing, and we
That'd be
spent...
all right with me.
I'm sure you'd be happy to get rid of it, but I don't think we're going to let you off that easy. So, I mean, from a policy perspective, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's the way to go, and, we've always enjoyed a good reputation with when we're either outgoing or ingoing, and we try to make it as seamless as possible for the municipality, because, that's our profession, and we do know how much work is involved, and the Lackey case is probably going to go to court again now that Chris Jackson and did some more investigation, so we'll be back there. But those are the type of things that, you'd have to rely on the new attorney to make that good
Let me offer
judgment.
this as a potential recommendation. Could we collectively ask that Mr. Czerniecki be involved as our impartial administrator, if you will, to meet with, in the event that Mr. Gannon is not the township attorney going forward, that whoever is appointed, that he or she and Mr. Gannon's firm, Mr. Czerniecki, sit down, and Mr. Czerniecki come back to the council with a recommendation, in his professional opinion, looking out for our financial interests, and say, this one should go to the new person that only started a week ago. This one should stay with the current attorney because it started 5 years ago. And have Mr. Czerniecki come back with a recommendation?
I have no issue with that. I mean, it has to be about what's best for the town.
Right.
I mean, I really, other than days when I get mad at Mr. Gannon, I like him.
All right.
I get mad at him
But from a policy perspective, is
I always like you.
are you okay with that, Mr. Howell?
I absolutely agree with
Mrs.
that.
Showmaker?
Absolutely,
All right.
and I'd just like to make a quick comment that I would like to see Mr. Gannon continue here in the township. I think he has done a fine job. I think that when we change, I have noticed, I guess because I've been here the longest, that when we have stopped and started, just like this ordinance, for a simple ordinance that has to do with the junkyard and the cars, took 6 years. The money that is wasted, it's wasted dollars and cents. I just want us to all keep that in mind. And we had a nice conversation in regards to the other thing, but...
All right, so here's what we've come up with so far. We're going to ask Mr. Czerniecki and Mr. Filiacci to report back to us about, can we construct a consulting fee, if you will, to replace a retainer so that whoever we hire would not be eligible for pension. We're not interested in paying employee benefits. We've also come to the conclusion that we would ask Mr. Czerniecki to act as an independent arbiter between whomever the new incoming attorney is in the event it is not Mr. Gannon, and Mr. Gannon's firm to review the legal work and make a determination on what should stay with the former attorney and what should stay with the new. We've also made a determination to eliminate at least 3 firms, and we've narrowed our list down to the remaining 5, if you will.
And
I think Mr. Walsh had made a recommendation, if I understand it, that potentially we should we should all individually call these firms, or alternatively, we can bring them all in on January 2nd, or bring in the ones we want to meet with. My only concern, I don't have an objection to calling them all individually, but I think there's something to be said. Mr. Howell may ask one of these attorneys a question that I didn't think of, that I may get the benefit of hearing the explanation when we're all together, rather than having some independent discussion. We might not be privy to some of the individual comments that each of us raise, where maybe Mrs. Showmaker asks a great question that I wouldn't have thought of. So if we're going to act as a body and have to work with whoever these people are as a team for the next year, perhaps that interaction as a body may be helpful.
Mayor, if I may just add one thing. When I was interviewing for jobs to be a planner in various towns, what we would do is we would sit out and wait to be invited in for an interview.
That's what we did.
And,
That's what the planning board does, actually. It's a good practice.
And so I would imagine that's how you'd want to structure it for the second, where the 5 firms get invited, asked to give a 5-minute overview of their capacity, and then you ask questions.
I'm okay with doing that with the rest of the professionals. Prosecutor, public defender, and attorney, I all think should be appointed on January 1st.
You think they should be appointed on...
Yes.
All right, so then what do we do between now and January 1st?
I think the idea of calling them individually and speaking to them is a good idea. I think one of the things that we're going to have to do is to tell them it, because, I'm looking at some of these, and most of them, I believe, set their schedules for the salaries and the retainers at 3 meetings a month for 12 months a year. I think we've already had some preliminary discussions of having 3 meetings a month for only 6 months a year.
Is that right?
So that would change.
Is that right? I didn't know that, okay.
Yeah, yes, thank you for informing us, Mr. Howell.
Is that right? So we're cutting back?
You know, it's,
We're
but
going to
there's-
diminish the public's right to participate?
No,
we
not
doing?
by any stretch of the imagination. But, you know, a lot of them may be counting on the benefits and the pension. And if that's something that, you know, that they wouldn't even want to consider the job without the benefits or the pension, they may remove themselves.
Maybe.
I have to ask a question. What are you talking about? We're going to do 6 months for
No, I
3
said
meetings?
we've had discussions, Angela and I, and then we were going to speak to Mr. Walsh this week about maybe cutting the meeting schedules down.
So we'll just
But
have 2
moving the
meetings a
meeting-
month?
Moving the public participation meetings around the township, instead of having them here every month.
Which we tried to do in the, we've moved it around.
Right, but have them at moving from middle school to middle school to middle school. on a
So we'll still have 3
rotating-
meetings a month, though?
Well, it sounds like only 6 months out of the year.
Well, 6 months out of the year, and then other months have a
2 meetings.
roundtable meeting here.
Well, that has to be, that's done by ordinance, so that needs to be done on
That's
January
something that we
1st.
all need to discuss, but we haven't had the opportunity to discuss anything. You know, I imagine that's something that we would have discussed last week.
Doesn't that go on for, isn't that ordinance on January 1st? For resolution?
Well, look, I mean, what the council could do is that we could just pass the normal schedule, and then you just cancel the meetings. I mean, you do have to advertise a meeting schedule in January.
Right.
If we haven't collectively talked about it, you probably just pass the ordinance that has 3 meetings a month, and then when the new majority, you know, when you guys do what you want to do, you could scale it back, and then they just cancel whatever meetings. I mean, it's not, I don't think it's a big deal,
We
right?
just pass another resolution.
You pass another resolution, you say the following blank meetings get canceled, that's all.
We haven't had a chance where all 5 of us are here.
Right, yeah, so you really can't talk about it until after the 1st, but I guess your point is, it could alter what they may be eligible to be paid if, for a certain number of months, they may only be coming here 2 nights a
Correct.
month rather than 3, which is a
Correct.
valid observation.
Right, and the other being that some of these individuals may say, well, if I'm not getting the benefits of the pension, call my name.
Wow. They
I
could,
don't know.
they certainly could.
Oh, I had one tell me that, who didn't apply for this town.
Boy, oh boy.
Yeah, I had Tony tell me that.
It may, by 6 months from now, may be legislated out anyway with pension reform.
Right, let's hope so.
Yeah, let's hope so.
All right, so just to try and put some closure on this, I think Mr. Walsh is recommending that we individually contact these firms and that we come here prepared to vote on January 1st. Is that what you're suggesting?
Absolutely.
I'd like to just,
All right, Mrs. Tromaker, you have an alternate suggestion.
no, just a quick comment. I am away on vacation. I have a vacation the week of 4th of July, the week of Christmas for the past 13 years. So I am going to be away on vacation January 1st, just so that you know.
Good for you.
I canceled my vacation, much as I didn't want to.
All right, so,
I offered the second, but no one really wanted to listen to me.
all right, so basically the recommendation sounds like we should all individually talk to these people, and then I guess we just come here and someone will make a motion and we'll go from there.
I just think we need to go to work. I mean, last year we interviewed public defenders, prosecutors, engineers, anybody. I mean, we sat here, we went through the resumes, okay? It was never suggested last year to bring everybody up here and interview them.
Right.
Okay? So I have no problem with point to 3. You want to interview the rest? Let's get after it. Let's get them all in here for 10-minute interviews. If you want to interview them, let's get after January 2nd. Let's authorize the manager to set up 20 interviews in 4 hours, 10-minute interviews.
What are we interviewing for?
I don't care, whatever you want. You want to interview everybody else, consulting engineer.
We did that.
We didn't interview them on
Right,
that.
if I could just point out one thing. For tonight, for purposes of tonight, what we did was we included 3, advice I was given is, you really want to have your legal team in place. How that's achieved, I'm not exactly sure, but administratively, there was a requirement to go through these ordinances as part of our ethics code. So I wanted to at least give the incoming council an opportunity, through whatever process they choose, to appoint the legal team. But the idea is, we didn't go through all the others, and we'll set up a separate process for that, be that, we have to sit down now and do this, what we're doing now, with all the other professionals, and we'll have to schedule that for sometime in January, and then the guidance might be to bring those all in for interviews as well, or however you want to do it.
Look, I think we have to be prepared on January 2nd. I'm going to tell you, the township attorney's position is very important, but so is the COA attorney, particularly with all the things we have going on. So is our labor council, with the collective bargaining issues that are constantly ongoing. So, I think we have to schedule right now that on January 2nd, we're going to begin to review these other firms. And I think in fairness, the reason we didn't do the interviews last year, quite frankly, was because there was largely a maintenance, if you will, in the majority of the members of the governing body who had known and had a level of comfort with the incumbent professionals. We did interview and entertain a couple of external proposals, and when it came right down to it, the preference was to stay with the in-force team. I think what's different this go-around is that there is going to be turnover in all reality, and as a result, we have to decide how we want to proceed in interviewing the new people.
Not sure in what direction we were going to get. We just confirmed with our existing other real key legal professionals, a co-attorney, a labor attorney, that they were going to keep working on the cases till advised otherwise, regardless of the calendar.
Yeah, and I think as a policy decision, unless anyone feels differently, absent the three we're talking about tonight, we don't want Jeff Leherr on December 31st to turn it in, if you will, because the clock, the things are going to continue to be ticking.
Yeah, so if I can have that guidance, that'd be great.
All right, so why don't we ask this as a policy decision? With the exception of the three we're talking about tonight, are we comfortable giving the manager directive that until we hire otherwise, that anyone that is currently employed by the municipality from a professional perspective should continue to do whatever they're working on until we hire somebody else, as quickly as we can hire them? And that's really a function of our schedule. But if we have reason to be in court on January 7th on a labor matter with a dispute with somebody, I don't know how we could not show up.
Whatever they're working on is fine with me. I'd like to see nothing new that doesn't have to be handed to anybody.
You agree, Mr. Howell?
That's fine.
Mrs. Showmaker? You have your direction, Mr. Czerniecki. Thank you. All right, so it sounds like the recommendation is going to be, we all call these people individually, and on January 1st, Mrs. Showmaker will not be here, and we'll go with whoever makes whatever motions and seconds.
I thought you said we were going to do this January 2nd.
No, January 2nd, we're going to have a meeting and interview a lot of the other.
Okay.
We'll set them up. Whoever you think the top 20 that we need to hire. If there's 3, 5, 6, and 4, I'm all for setting them up on January 2nd. I mean...
So we'll advertise a series of special meetings, which we could then cancel, but we'll...
Okay.
Because I might need the flexibility to, given the short time now, I mean, the 2nd's not that far away, might have to put them a week out or something. So we'll schedule a series of Tuesday meetings before the meeting on the 16th.
I think it's a very short time for somebody who'd like a job. Okay? I don't think anybody will have an issue with making me on the 2nd. We should like you to come in for a 10-minute interview.
We might not even be able to get everybody.
Do the best you can. No problem.
You have your direction.
Colleen's going to get on that right away.
It's not my call. I'm sorry?
What time is it on January 2nd, 7:30?
It's not my call. What time is it on the 2nd?
Let's do it early.
I have a very,
I have a great new job.
Getting here at 6:30.
I don't have to make the decisions.
Forget the hammer, you got to make.
You got the gavel.
What time are we starting on the 6th? Well, I'll be at work on the 2nd, you mean? Unless we're doing this meeting in Cherry Hill at my office.
Our meetings are at,
Well, let's ask this, I mean, we hang around, by and large, so like, what's the earliest you'd all like to start?
The earliest I could be here is 6:30. That's because I work in Cherry Hill.
That's a push for me, but he knows. It's a.
Well, we'll have no executives, I mean, I'm fine with 6:30.
6:30 fine with me.
So 6:30, can we give Mr. Chernetsky some direction? My recommendation would be, we should maybe, let's be realistic, it's going to be very, very difficult to get 15 of these people in one night. And I think we should attempt to set up maybe 2 to 3 meetings, and let's get the legal team done. So maybe for January 2nd, we have the labor attorney, the COA attorneys, the tax appeal attorneys. You just make that a legal night. And then come back to us with another recommendation for a meeting, and we'll do a planner night, so that we're not jumping around, so that when we're comparing credentials of planners, we can have a benchmark where, well, we just talked to this guy, and he said this, and this other firm said that. It may be helpful from a frame of reference. Now, it's clearly I have a new role, and it isn't to make these decisions, but I'll just offer that as a recommendation. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Mayor, my only suggestion might be to help Tom would be, everybody can, between now and whenever, go through all those. We can't hear.
It's okay. Maybe, I don't want to put a number on it, but with all these other, I don't know how many people have applied for all those various positions. Maybe everybody can just call Tom and say, look, I've looked at 15 and I want to interview 5. And maybe it'll be overlap, and maybe you won't have 15, maybe it'll come down to 5 or 6, maybe that's one way of doing it.
Well, why don't we start off more realistically, council's preference, that on January 2nd, we attempt to go through the legal team. We agree with that?
I'm fine with that, Mayor.
That's fine.
So put all the attorneys together, tax, labor, whoever they are, tell them to be here at 6:30. I think you got to tell them, be prepared to stay a while. We'll try and get through them as quickly as we can. 10, 15 minutes apiece. Tell them to come in with a short bullet point of their credentials and give us the salient reasons why we would hire them over somebody else. And they'd be prepared to negotiate fees.
Okay, and just so we're clear, this is generally a contract negotiation, so it's an executive session process.
I mean, unless anyone feels differently, you typically would negotiate a contract in private rather than, otherwise, you're negotiating your fee so that the last guy gets to come up and say, I'll do it for the lowest amount of money. I think you may be putting these professionals in an unfair bargaining position, and you could be putting us in an unfair position, too.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed, we'll do it in closed?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker? Okay, so we'll do it in closed. All right, so the takeaways for tonight, you're going to get back to us with regard to professional consulting fees versus retainer. We're not interested in benefits. We're not interested in pension. Okay. By virtue of process of elimination, we've decided that the solo practitioner firms are to be eliminated, if you will. On January 1st, we're going to come here, someone's going to make a motion, and we're going to talk about the 3 attorneys that we're on for tonight: township attorney, public defender, and prosecutor. Mr. Chernetsky's been given a policy direction that absent those 3 appointments, all other professionals are continue as is on a temporary basis, with the understanding that they may not be retained, and that we'll get back to them as soon as we're ready to interview them. And you're going to advertise for a meeting on January 2nd for closed session purposes to begin at 6:30 in these chambers, where we're going to interview the various attorneys.
Right, correct, but I see you guys packing up a little bit. I just want to be clear, so they can open the door, so the door can be open, or we can put the ordinance requirement behind us at this point. You still have to look through the prosecutor and the defender
You are correct.
packets.
Call council's attention to prosecutor, public defender materials for compliance with our ethics ordinance. I'm going to read these into the record for your consideration. We have applications for the position of municipal prosecutor. The first applicant is the firm of, these are in no particular order, John Thaddeus Rahaychik. Solo practitioner, John Thaddeus Rahaychik. His offices are...
Is that his name?
John Thaddeus.
All of these are solos, aren't they, Mayor, for the prosecutor?
I believe they all are, which means we
All
really...
except for one.
Yeah, maybe there may be one that is not.
Right.
Well, let's read them into the record. So we have this particular firm. Mr. Rahaychik has provided his mandatory equal opportunity employment notice. His offices are located at 53 Scenic Drive in Freehold. He has his business registration certificate, his State Department Division of Revenue Client Bureau form. He's given us his professional services entity information form. He's given us his professional credentials where he served previously. He has provided that he would perform these services, which is typically an annual amount. That's what it currently has been, I think, for some time in the town, $35,000 a year. Applicant will work for the salary awarded last year's successful bidder, and as provided by municipal ordinance, the standard hourly rate of $100 for any municipal work, of which I don't think there would be any. Right there, how could there be any municipal work?
I don't know.
Right, I mean, I don't,
The only thing I can figure might be an appeal to a municipal
Okay.
court conviction to a Superior Court.
all right, he's provided his professional credentials, his resume. He's given us the experiences of the different firms that he's worked at. He's also provided his acknowledgement of corrections, additions, and deletions. The second firm is Joseph D. Grisanti, Law Offices of Joseph D. Grisanti. Just for the record, Mr. Grisanti has represented my parents in a personal matter some while back, so I will recuse myself from any discussion on Mr. Grisanti. Just for reading it into the record, his law offices are in Jackson and Ocean County. He provided the appropriate insurance acknowledgement forms, his mandatory equal opportunity, his business registration certificate, his certificate of employment. He has also given us his professional credentials and the locations where he has served as an attorney. His fee would be $35,000 a year, which is what the current amount is. He's given us his acknowledgement and corrections, and he's given us his professional credentials. It appears as if he is a solo practitioner. The next is Stephen Rubin. For the record, Mr. Rubin had formerly been the municipal prosecutor, I believe, for a 2-year period in the early 2000s. His office is located in West Long Branch, New Jersey. He is the sole proprietor and solo practitioner. He's given us his disclosure of ownership. He's given us his insurance requirement forms. He's provided his professional attorney's liability policy and all of his professional insurance materials, his equal employment opportunity forms. He's also provided his business registration certificate. He's given us his professional credentials, which include all of his background. It indicates he's available 24 hours a day to answer emergencies for the police department. He's indicated that he would perform these services for a flat amount of $30,000 a year, which is apparently less than the current. He's given his acknowledgement of corrections and additions, and he's provided his resume.
Is that listed on current?
I believe the current is 30. You know what, I don't know. Do you know what the current is, Mr. Filiaccio?
I'm just asking.
Is it 30 or 35?
Prosecutor?
Yes, sir.
It's 30,000.
30, it is 30.
It is 30.
Okay, so he would propose to do it at the current.
And that could be a fee, right, Mr. Filiaccio?
He's got to get an answer.
That's one we do not know.
All right, you're going to check it out for us. Okay, the next applicant. The next applicant is, this is backwards. It is Stephen Zabarski, Robert Greitz, Doug Jones, James Fennessy. This is the incumbent from the firm of Sita Hosapple Zabarski, specifically Stephen Zabarski, a partner at the firm, Dover Township, New Jersey. They provided the disclosure of ownership. Mr. Zabarski is one of the partners and owners. They've given us their insurance requirements, their mandatory equal opportunity, their certificate of employment, their business registration materials. They provided all of their professional services forms. They've given us their submission with their resume. They have provided this for the last 4 years, annual salary $30,000, and they've given us the professional backup for both the prosecutor and I guess also the alternate, because they have been functioning and applied for both. And they've given us their acknowledgement of corrections and additions. The next person is applying apparently only for the alternate prosecutor's position. The alternate in this situation, I don't know why they would just apply for the alternate. This is Robert Greitz, with whom we've already read the firm's credentials. So I guess that's the Hosapple firm, so it's all of the same credentials. So those are the credentials and the different applicants to comply with our ordinance.
There's one more.
Sorry?
John T. Lane.
Oh, boy.
John T. Lane.
Why don't I have that?
He's here.
Hey, Mayor,
Can I borrow it, please?
It's from Wall.
here's a short story.
Okay, John T. Lane Jr., attorney at law. He's given us his
Baton Rouge.
professional credentials, his non-collusion affidavit, his disclosure of ownership, his insurance requirements, his mandatory equal employment. His law offices are located at 1740 Pennell Court in Wall, New Jersey. He's provided his submission form, he's provided his professional credentials, and he has, for some reason, I don't see a price.
It says, on that spreadsheet, it says same, so I believe.
Yeah, he put down here, all right, same as present. Okay, so that would be the 30,000. He's given us his acknowledgement and corrections. He has given us his business registration certificate and his equal opportunity employment material. Thank you for pointing that one out. For some reason, if I can get a copy of Mr. Lane's, I don't have his in my packet. So if somebody could just shoot me a copy so I can review it. Public defender's position. There are several. First is firm of Kevin N. Starkey, Brick Township, New Jersey, of the firm Starkey, Kelly, Bauer, Canale, and Cunningham. They've applied for other positions. Just for the benefit of the council, we've already read into the record their specific credentials. They also applied for the township attorney's position. Also applying for the position of public defender.
Mayor, have you ever worked with them before?
I have not.
Okay.
I'm
just
not,
asking.
yeah, I don't know these guys.
All right.
Sharkey,
Starkey, yeah.
or Starkey. I do not, I'm not familiar with the firm.
Okay.
Yeah, they weren't what.
All right, the next is Jonathan H. Lemuro of the firm Lemuro, Davidson, Eastman, Munez, and Hugel. And they are located at 365 East Freehold Road. They have provided their insurance requirements, their mandatory equal opportunity. They have provided the specific credentials for Jonathan Lemuro and Theodore Fishman. They have given their amounts. This is the public defender. They've given them hourly amounts. Is this not currently a flat amount?
Is that the one?
Currently, public defenders pay $25,000. Part of it comes from the fees charged by the judge to the low-income
Okay.
people.
All right, so just for the benefit of the council, it's currently $25,000 fee. All right, this firm is proposing an amount not to exceed $28,000. They've also given their hourly rates, but I think our preference would be to kind of really stick with at least the fee, but that's the new council's prerogative. They've given us their professional address, which is 100 Willowbrook Road, Freehold, New Jersey. They've given us their acknowledgement, corrections, additions, and deletions, their sealed submission label for proposal. They've given us their liability insurance, their certificate of employment. They've given us their State of New Jersey business registration form, and that appears to be complete. Public defender continues. The next is David A. Paranello, the incumbent. His offices are, actually, he resides in Ocean County in Jackson, New Jersey. His office is at 141 Docare Road in Jackson. He is a solo practitioner. He's given us his professional liability insurance, mandatory equal opportunity, his submission form with his credentials. He's been the public defender for the last 3 years. He has provided that he would be willing to work for the current salary. He's given his acknowledgement and corrections, and he filled out the checklist. I don't see in his packet, I'm certain we have it somewhere, his business certificate registration form. At least it's not included in mine. There is a check-off list that appears to be checked off, but,
Yeah, it's all checked off on the spreadsheet.
all right, so presumably...
We may have that on
Bushkin-
file.
You may have it on file, because he's already with us. Okay. The next is,
That was the one that's there now, man?
yes, he is. Mr. Parnell is there today. Joseph D. Grisanti, we've already read his credentials into the record. So we talked about Mr. Grisanti.
That's the one you know.
The next is Raymond A. Rea. Mr. Rea is located at 54 Court Street, Freehold, New Jersey, of the firm Raymond Albert Rea Esquire. He has provided his disclosure of ownership, he's provided his insurance acknowledgement, his mandatory equal opportunity, his business registration certificate, his professional services form. He's provided his resume. He's indicating he would do this job for $24,000 a year. He's provided his background information. He's given his resume and other municipalities where he has performed, his acknowledgement and corrections, and a series of references from various professionals and individuals with whom he has done business. It's Mr. Rea. The next is Frank J. Howell, attorney at law. He's provided, again, for the position of public defender, his business registration certificate, his non-collusion affidavit, his disclosure of ownership, solo practitioner, his insurance requirements, his mandatory equal opportunity, his certificate of employment, his professional services entity form. He's given us his credentials. He will perform the position at its present salary, and he's given us his acknowledgement of corrections. And the last appears to be the firm of it's the firm of Sean D. Gertner of Gluck, Allen, and Gertner, Township of Lakewood, Ocean County, public defender, located at 217 Washington Street, Toms River. They've given us the disclosure of ownership, their insurance requirement form, their mandatory equal opportunity notice, their professional services form, their business registration certificate, their certificates of the court. They've given us their references and professional credentials, resumes, if you will, of the various law partners, and they would do this for $350 per session. How many court sessions are there in a year? Anybody know?
There's some day and night, so.
It's about 3 a week at least.
3 a week, so you're talking about?
150 times 350, they want 50, 60,000.
Okay, there you have it. All right, so those are there any other position, any other bidders I've overlooked for public defender? Okay, so pursuant to our ordinance, we have read into the record positions for township attorney, deputy township attorney, prosecutor, alternate prosecutor, public defender. I presume it is the intention of the new majority to make nominations on January 1st. If we so desire, we can contact any of these firms, I guess, between now and January, ask our questions, and you won't be here?
Are we doing some, you said January 1st or January 2nd?
January 1st, Mr. Walsh has indicated that they're going to appoint township attorney, the prosecutor, and the public defender on January,
We have to, right?
or you do a carryover. I mean, it's one or the other. And then on January 2nd, we'll start interviews for the other positions. Is that right? Is that your plan?
That is accurate.
There you got it.
All the other
Is there any other business, Mr. Chunetsky?
I don't know.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. We have a second. All those in favor? Have a pleasant evening. Meeting is adjourned.